The rain had not yet reached the sprawl of Pentos when Daenerys Targaryen stepped onto the windswept balcony of Illyrio Mopatis Manse, but she could feel its coming in her bones. A hush in the air, a prickle on her skin, the hush before a monsoon that would sweep dust from every corner of Essos. Below, the lemon trees in Illyrio's private garden drooped under the weight of unpicked fruit, their leaves trembling though no wind stirred. She drew her cloak of pale lavender silk tighter about her shoulders and watched the long, straight street where Sellswords and freedmen hurried to shutter windows, secure awnings, and curse the sky. Ser Jorah Mormont emerged from the arched doorway behind her, moving with the quiet confidence of a man twice his size. He paused, as if reluctant to intrude upon her solitude, though Daenerys had never felt it to be an intrusion. His presence was steadying, a stone buttress against a world of shifting dust. 6 moons had passed since he first knelt to her on the edge of the Dothraki Sea, pledging sword and life and honor, and not once had she doubted the iron in his words. "Khaleesi," he said softly, "it will be upon us within the hour." "Let it come," Daenerys replied, her gaze fixed on the reddening horizon. "A rain that washes clean is a blessing to those patient enough to endure the soaking." Ser Jorah's lips quirked in gentle amusement, spoken like one who was born to storm. He stepped beside her, bracing forearms against the marble balustrade. "Incidentally, Illyrio's servants are in a panic. It seems 10,000 new linen sheets must be whisked from the lines before they're drenched. And how fares our own linen? Folded, packed, ready to sail at your word." She perched on the rail, letting the city sprawl beneath her, canals clogged with barges, copper-roofed bathhouses gleaming dully in the gloom, and far to the east the rippling mirror of the Rhoyne. Somewhere among those crooked lanes slept 3 dragon eggs, swaddled in velvet. Somewhere on that river a ship named Balerion bobbed at anchor, provisions stacked from keel to crow's nest. Each detail reeked of inevitability. Her brother Viserys would call it destiny, but Daenerys preferred the plain truth. She had chosen this path. Ser Jorah cleared his throat. "There's word from Myr. The Triarchs squabble and Volantis sniffs opportunity." "What else is new in Essos?" she asked, smiling. He tilted his head, weighing her humor. "Nothing at all. But an old friend of mine, Simon Stryback, Sellsword, liar, undefeated drinker, writes that Volantine envoys are scouring the free cities for dragons. Ahead of us." Daenerys' pulse quickened. "They've heard rumors. Rumors ride faster than ravens. It matters little what they have heard, what matters is what they believe. And Khaleesi, they believe very much. Yet Jorah himself believed most of all. From that first night, when he sat across a campfire and spoke of Bear Island, of the green hills of the north and the Maiden Falls, she had felt the pull of his sincerity. There was a gravity in him, a sorrow too hefty for one man's shoulders that nonetheless would not break him. And she, Daenerys Stormborn, last blood of the dragon, could lean upon that sorrow the way a child leans on an older brother, knowing he will stand. "Let them come," she said again. "When the dragons wake, Volantis will kneel." He did not scoff, nor did he worship. He simply nodded, a knight accepting the battlefield as it was. "We should leave with the tide. Illyrio's gold has greased half the harbormaster's palms, but a storm delays even the finest bribes. Viserys will delay us more." Ser Jorah's knuckles whitened. "Your brother undermines you in every council." Her heart stung at the truth of it. He is the dragon. Though each time she said it, the words felt hollower, as though some small eddy of loyalty drained from her veins. "He thinks he leads. We shall let him continue to think so, until there is no further harm he can do." Jorah said nothing, but in the jade of his eyes she saw the true pledge of a Queensguard. He would be her shield against Viserys as surely as against any Sellsword blade. A peal of thunder rumbled across the bay. The first fat drop spattered upon the marble rail, followed by 3 more in quick succession. Then the heavens rent open, and Essos disappeared behind shimmering curtains of silver. That night, the hall of Illyrio Mopatis was a forest of candelabra, each flame dancing in the breeze that slipped beneath the doors whenever a wet courier or trembling servant staggered inside. Daenerys dined beside the merchant prince himself, a toad-fat man whose smiles were as bottomless as his cellars. Viserys lounged farther down the table, half-drunk and wholly indignant, flanked by Tyroshi perfumers whose every breath reeked of lime and elderflower. Ser Jorah stood behind Daenerys' chair, inscrutable, armed, never once letting his eyes stray from the faces of those who might mean her harm, or more subtly, her humiliation. Illyrio's musicians plucked soft Myrish chords while servants wheeled out honeyed duck, spiced peppers, pomegranates split like bleeding hearts. Yet Daenerys tasted none of it. Her thoughts strayed seawards to the ship that would bear her away from Pentos and towards the wide Dothraki Sea, towards fire and blood and glory. Halfway through a dish of saffron rice, Viserys slammed his goblet down, sloshing wine. "We should have sailed yesterday. The wind was fair. You delay me, Illyrio." The merchant prince dabbed grease from his chin. "Dear prince, a single day's patience will not cost you your crown. My crown has been 20 years in the losing." Viserys roared, "I have waited long enough." The hall fell silent. Even the musicians stilled their lutes. Servants froze, silver platters trembling in their hands. Daenerys felt the heat crawl up her throat. She rose, placing 2 fingers lightly upon the back of her brother's chair. "The storm has passed, your grace," she said, voice smooth as silk. "We sail on the morning tide, as planned." Viserys turned upon her, violet eyes blazing. "You would speak for me now, sweet sister?" He lurched to his feet, knocking over a platter of quails. "Remember your place." "My place is at your side," she said evenly, "until we reach Khal Drogo's Khalasar. And then, she whispered, "I shall ride beside my lord husband, and you shall ride behind us until you cross the sea, to Westeros, to reclaim that which was stolen." The words were ceremony, learned by rote, a litany meant to soothe his rage. But tonight the litany failed. Viserys drew back his hand. In that breath between threat and strike, Jorah Mormont moved. His gauntlet fingers caught Viserys' wrist in mid-motion, gentled the blow without force yet with unanswerable authority. "Your grace," he said, quiet enough to still the air. The Khaleesi meant no offense. Viserys stared at the hand that restrained him, shock and fury battling across his narrow face. "Unhand me, exile." Jorah released him at once, yet remained close enough that Viserys could feel the man's heat. "Forgive my impetuousness," he bowed. "And forgive me if I beg you to conserve your strength for worthier enemies." The prince's nostrils flared. But the hall was watching, and so at last he merely spat, "See that it never happens again," and stalked into the gloom of a side passage. Daenerys' heart hammered. She met Jorah's gaze. In that shared silence flickered a wordless pact. Betrayal, once seated, might have grown here. A secret message slipped to King Robert's spymaster, an echo of the treachery that doomed her father. Yet Ser Jorah remained rock-steady. He had become her wall long before Viserys raised his hand. Tonight was only proof. Illyrio cleared his throat. Musicians resumed their gentle chords. Conversation, faltering, lurched back to life. Yet every candle threw twin shadows now, one tall and one slight, that spoke of a brother's ire and a knight's unyielding vigilance. Dawn bled across the sky like rose wine when Balerion slipped from Pentoshi harbor. Sails fattened, ropes groaned, gulls wheeled overhead, screeching protest at this intrusion upon their kingdom. Daenerys stood on the quarterdeck, cloak snapping in the brine-rich wind, Jorah beside her. "You did not sleep," he noted. "I did," she lied. He smiled. "Your eyes tell tales other than your tongue." She laughed softly. "Then perhaps I should veil them." "Perhaps," he agreed, though his smile faltered. "The world grows sharper every league we sail. I would not have you meet its cruelty before you must." They watched Pentos recede, golden roofs glittering in the newborn sun. A thin plume of smoke rose from the western hill. Viserys, no doubt, penning yet another furious letter of complaint to Illyrio while Daenerys and Jorah claimed the prow. She wondered if her brother felt the ache of departure as she did. That simultaneous tug of loss and relief, as though a shackle snapped at the instant another clamped. Beyond the Rhoyne Delta, the summer sea spread cobalt and infinite. Southward lay the scattered pearls of the stepstones. Northward, the black cliffs and the pirate dens of Myrish valleys. East, ever east, across leagues of grass and bone, waited Khal Drogo. "Do you fear him?" Jorah asked abruptly, as if pulling the thought from her mind. Daenerys shook her head. "I fear misunderstanding. He will expect a bride like no other. Yet I am no other. I am but myself." "That is enough," he said. and the certainty in his voice warmed her more than the rising sun. Hours passed in gentle quiet. Deckhands sang shanties in low Valyrian. The helmsman spat grape seeds overboard. Sailors tossed dice for coppers while gulls screamed overhead. Jorah fetched 2 cups of prune wine, watered and spiced, and they sipped together beneath a crimson sail. "Tell me of Bear Island," she said, craving stories of damp pine forests and shaggy-maned bears. He obliged, voice low, weaving portraits of gnarled sentinels older than the wall, of roaring waterfalls and long nights when torches flickered against snow-thick pines. He spoke of his father, Lord Commander Jorah Mormont of the Night's Watch, and of his own folly that led him to exile. But he spoke without self-pity, and that cleaved her heart all the more. When the sun perched at its zenith, casting molten mirrors upon the sea, a cry rose from the crow's nest, "Sail to leeward!" Daenerys squinted. A thin, gleaming blade on the horizon angling to intercept. "Who bears arms on those decks?" she asked. "Slavers, Jorah deemed after a moment's study. Or pirates? Neither is welcome." Instinct tightened his features. He barked at the master-at-arms, who scrambled to loose the shields stored beneath the rail. Archers strung Myrish composite bows, deckhands armed themselves with boarding axes and rust-spotted spears. The sea breathed, indifferent as 2 ships shifted into lines of battle that had existed long before men named the seasons. "Stay behind the mast," Jorah told her. "If the worst comes, hide within the hold." "What of you?" "I am your sworn sword." He smiled, slow and sure. "If blood must spill, let it be mine first." The enemy galley drew nearer, black hull knifing the waves. Ragged men in boiled leather lined her railings, sabers raised, voices a tangle of Giskery and Volantine curses. Their prow bore the figurehead of a serpent devouring its own tail. A hungry omen. Valyrian's captain beat a tattoo on the deck with a bronze-shod mallet, doof doof doof, the heartbeat of readiness. Archers notched. A hush fell as if the sea itself inhaled. "Loose," the captain bellowed. A cloud of arrows hissed skyward. Daenerys flinched at the sound, a flock of swallows turned deadly. The shafts fell amidst the pirates like iron rain, felling 6, perhaps 10. She watched one man topple over the rail, arms windmilling, mouth gaping, a boy, no older than 15. And into her breast there crept a pang of grief, for the boy's mother would never know his fate. Yet she steeled her heart. The pirate galley came on, unwilling to yield easy prey. Grapples whirred overhead, thudded onto Valyrian's deck, biting wood. Pirates swarmed the lines, howling. Jorah Mormont met them at the rail. He was a whirlwind in rust-red gambeson, longsword flashing, shield smashing, boots braced against each collision. A tattooed Giskery leapt skirling, and Ser Jorah's blade sheared through the man's wrist. He pivoted, slashed, flowed on. A Volantine duelist thrust a trident at his ribs. Jorah batted it aside and drove steel through the attacker's thigh, crumpling him. His every motion was economy, honed by exile and desperation. Daenerys could only watch, breath shallow, as men died beneath the sun's glare. She thought of the dragons slumbering below decks, thought of fire, thought of screams, and ached for the day when such foes would yield at the mere sound of wings. At length the pirates broke. They hacked the grappling ropes free, pushing comrades into the sea to buy seconds. Their archers loosed a final, ragged volley, then dove for the oars. Valyrian's crew jeered as the serpent-prowed galley limped away, blood in her wake. Jorah leaned upon the rail, chest heaving. Though sweat streaked his brow, his eyes found Daenerys at once, assuring her of survival before he dared wipe blood from his cheek. When he approached, she seized both his hands. They were sticky with crimson. She did not let go. "Seven bless you," she whispered. He shook his head. "I quit the 7 when I quit my honor. Today I merely proved I have some left to spare." But she saw more than honor in him. She saw the promise of safety, the promise of counsel unmarred by hidden bargains. She lifted his hands to her lips, kissed the knuckles gently. "Sir Knight," she murmured, "stay by me. Always." His breath shuddered. "Until my death," he vowed as the waves lapped like applause. 3 weeks later, the Khalasar enveloped them like a living canyon of horse flesh and human heat. Thunderous hooves raised pillars of dust, riders in bronze scales whooped greetings, lean gray coursers sprang aside as eunuch slaves hauled chests bursting with spices, silks, and copper statuary. Khal Drogo himself lounged on a white stallion at the head of his blood riders. Hair braided to his belt, chest bare but for the Iraq sheathed across his back. He studied Daenerys with dark, unreadable eyes, while beside him Aggo and Ricardo muttered in their guttural tongue. Daenerys felt Jorah's presence at her shoulder like armor. She dismounted, held her brother's expensive gifts in outstretched hands, and spoke the ritual words that Illyrio had drilled into her ears. Sun and stars, I offer you salt of the earth and blood of the dragon, that our two worlds might become one. Her Valyrian lilt wove through the Dothraki vowels. The riders leaned closer, puzzled yet intrigued by this silver princess who spoke as no milk cow ever had. Drogo inclined his head. Daenerys thought she saw a ghost of appreciation flicker across his lips. When his blood rider Kotho reached for her, as custom demanded, Jorah stepped forward. She has come to you intact, he warned in Dothraki. Touch her now and feel my steel. The blood riders bristled, hands upon hilts. A murmur rippled through the Khalasar. Daenerys could see the insult burning, could feel it like a cauldron between them. But Khal Drogo merely laughed, a deep, rolling thunder. He waved off his blood riders, dismounted in one smooth motion, and lifted Daenerys effortlessly to his horse. In that act, the insult melted into awe, for no Khal dismounted for any bride save one worthy of queenly stature. Yet he had. Later, in the purple hush of twilight, Daenerys found Jorah waiting outside her tent, sword across his knees. You risked much, she said. To preserve your dignity is no risk. Telling a blood rider what he may or may not touch is no risk? She smiled. You will earn scars you cannot see, sire. Better me than you, he answered, eyes soft. She touched his cheek. I shall need wise counsel in the days ahead. The Dothraki respect strength, you know their language and their ways. Teach me. I shall. And stay vigilant. Viserys plots even now. Viserys, Jorah snorted. He's a cracked chalice, dangerous only if you insist on pouring wine into him. Still, she worried. He will pry for allies. He will promise kingships for men too foolish to know his purse is filled with wind. Jorah rose, donned his helm. Let him promise what he likes. I am no windswept purse. And if he should jeopardize you, he drew his sword just far enough that moonlight glimmered along its edge. This is sharper than his crown. Tom drifted on a tide of hoofbeats. Days bled into weeks, weeks into moons. Daenerys learned the names of 100 herbs with which to flavor horsemeat stew. She learned the language of the whip and the laughter of slave girls. She learned to ride not behind but beside her lord husband, and in time to ride in front, a Khaleesi untamed. And through each lesson Ser Jorah walked at her side or stood at her back, translator, tutor, sentinel, friend. In his presence, her confidence flowered bold and strange. She spoke to Drogo without halting, demanded a place in council, insisted on knowing every path the Khalasar would take. The more she learned, the greater her hunger grew. Jorah fed it with stories of Westeros, names of bannermen, fortresses perched on cliffs, the ancient vow of House Targaryen to protect the innocent. One blistering afternoon, as the Khalasar camped by the Red Lake, Daenerys found Jorah in the shade of a palmetto, whetting his sword. I have asked Drogo for ships, she announced. Jorah stilled. And he refused? He laughed, said the sea is their enemy. But he promised raiders to scour Lazer for riches enough to buy 1,000. Plunder is a coin accepted everywhere. Jorah resumed his meticulous strokes on the whetstone. Yet the mother of dragons should not purchase thrones with the tears of shepherds. Daenerys crouched, hugging her knees. Would you deny me my birthright? Never. But I would guard your soul as fiercely as your crown. She stared at the rippling lake. You believe I can have both. I believe, he said, you are still writing the measure of your reign. Let each sentence be worthy. Her heart swelled. Then guide my quill, sire, for I know the ink but not the grammar. He nodded once, slower than a vow yet deeper than an oath. It happened on the 12th moon after their wedding. The Khalasar had crossed the painted dunes and reached Vis Toloro, the city of ghosts. There, amid crumbling white walls, Daenerys felt the stir of life within her belly. She told Jorah first because she could not bear the knowledge lingering unspoken in her chest another heartbeat. He knelt, pressed his brow to her swollen stomach. A dragon, he whispered. Forgive me, your grace, but I pray he bears your strength and not his father's temper. She laughed, tears slipping free. And perhaps your patience. Gods forbid, he chuckled, rising. Yet tears brimmed in his own eyes. I have failed so many oaths. But this one I shall keep. I will see this child crown you both. You speak like a man who rides at death's heels, she chided. As we all do. But I only mean I will not fail you, Daenerys. It was the first time he called her that without title, without ceremony. The name on his tongue was gentle as sunrise. She reached for his hand and found it trembling. In that moment she glimpsed the boy he had been dreaming of age. Wonner, kissed by northern snows. She clasped his hand until the tremor eased. The first true fracture came when Viserys, wine-addled and desperate, tried to snatch a dragon egg from her tent. Jorah caught him halfway to the corral, egg clutched against his ribs. He pressed the prince flat, blade at Viserys' throat. "I should kill you," he hissed, "for theft, for sacrilege, for the blow you meant to her heart." Viserys quivered. "Mercy," he croaked. "Mercy, exile. I will be your king. You will be dust if you touch what is hers again." Jorah returned the egg to Daenerys' arms, then turned back to Viserys. "Run, before Drogo hears." Viserys fled into the desert night. He returned days later, sun-fevered, escorted by Khal Pono's riders, who presented the broken prince like a gift. Drogo despised weakness. Yet Daenerys pleaded for her brother's life, and Drogo relented at her tears. It made no difference. Viserys betrayed them that very night, selling secrets to a rival Khal in exchange for 50 horses and a hollow promise of an army. Jorah led the Dothraki scouts who hunted him down. They found the prince lying where his new allies had left him, stripped, half-scalped, throat cut ear to ear. His purple eyes stared skyward, unblinking. Daenerys wept only a little. Jorah buried the body himself. Atop the cairn he placed a smooth stone etched with the sigil of House Targaryen, a three-headed dragon, wings spread wide. That night, beneath a sky heavy with fireflies, Daenerys asked Jorah to teach her the words of the Westerosi funeral rite. Together they murmured them, and with each whispered word she felt the last tether to her brother's crown fray and fall away. The moons turned again, and Drogo's khalasar rode west to the Jade Sea, plundering and reveling, rich beyond counting. Yet Drogo's mind surely never left the dragon bride who glimmered like a comet at his side. His laughter rang louder, his oaths grew grander, and in the dark of their tent he spoke soft Dothraki endearments that no man alive had ever heard him utter. When the time came for Drogo to claim the 7 kingdoms in her name, it was not Viserys who demanded it, nor Illyrio's scrolls, nor any whisper of a spymaster. It was Daenerys herself, guided by Jorah's counsel, tempered by compassion. She bade Drogo look eastward and westward both and see not conquest but legacy. So Drogo swore, before a roaring council fire, that he would give his son the iron chair of Westeros as a new cradle. The moon of her life rode in glory, and beside him rode Jorah Mormont, knight in smithy bronze, unbroken by exile. Among the Dothraki, the bear had become legend, the man who spoke truth to Khal and Khaleesi alike, the shield whose loyalty could not be bought or bent. On the day the dragons hatched, the desert burned white. Daenerys entered the funeral pyre clad in silk and prophecy. When dawn rose she stood unburnt, 3 hatchlings clinging to her shoulders, talons biting gently into smoking flesh. Around her knelt every rider, every slave, every freedman. Drogo, breathless, fell to one knee. Jorah Mormont knelt second, sword laid across open palms. "Blood of my blood," he said, voice raw. The words were Dothraki, but his eyes spoke of Bear Island, of oaths forged in snows and tempered in exile. "My queen." Daenerys took the hilt of his sword and bid him rise. In that rising a new realm was born, not of iron, but of fire and faith. No raven flew to Varys, no parchment branded Jorah a traitor, for no betrayal had ever taken root. Instead, the tales that crossed the narrow sea told of a silver queen and her stone-handed bear, of dragons stirring in the east, and a khalasar that rode beneath banners of crimson and black. Years later, when Daenerys Targaryen laid siege to King's Landing, it was Ser Jorah Mormont who rode at the head of her host, cloak of silver-threaded bearskin rippling behind. Dragons screamed overhead, shadows vast as mountains. The walls of the city shook beneath their fire, yet within that furnace Daenerys held her hand, waiting for surrender. Jorah found her atop a hill of trampled wildflowers. "The Lord send envoys with keys to every gate," he reported. "What of the people?" she asked. "They cheer your banners. They know the cruelties of Cersei's reign." Daenerys closed her eyes, hearing the distant roar of Drogon's wings. "Then let them open the gates. We shall enter as liberators, not conquerors. And should the lions bare their teeth?" She looked at him. "Then we bare ours." Jorah's smile was feral. "As you command." They rode together, side by side, through gates unbarred, through streets strewn with rose petals and broken chains. Cersei Lannister stood atop the steps of the Red Keep, clutching her young son, eyes wide with disbelief. Daenerys dismounted, dragonfire reflecting in her violet eyes. Ser Jorah positioned himself between Queen and Lioness, sword half-drawn, the silent promise of death to any who dared reach for a weapon. No one did. Cersei bent the knee. And so the Iron Throne, forged of 1,000 surrendered blades, accepted a new queen whose rule was tempered by the loyalty of one man who had never betrayed her, whose constancy shielded her from assassins both subtle and overt, whose counsel guided her to mercy where others would have fallen to rage. In the years that followed, songs were sung of the Dragon Queen and her Bear Knight, of how trust unbroken can shift the tides of kingdoms. Children named their ponies Jorah and painted dragons upon stable doors. And far in the north, upon a snowy crag where pine forests whispered of home, Lord Jorah Mormont smiled in quiet pride to learn that his son had redeemed both name and heart by keeping faith when faith mattered most. The wheel of history turned ever and always, yet in one bright hinge of time, a single choice, never to betray, set the stones upon a gentler path, and all the 7 kingdoms felt the tremor of that kindness echo for generations. The winter roses on the outer parapets of Maegor's holdfast shivered in the pale dawn, their petals rhymed with hoarfrost despite the lingering warmth of summer farther south. The old maesters muttered that weather had become a riddle since the dragons returned, as though the very air bent around Daenerys Stormborn's presence, warm winds sweeping up the Blackwater one day, snow flurries dusting the cobblestones the next. On the Queen's balcony, Daenerys watched a single white petal spiral from its stem and drift across the yawning courtyard. Below, the changing of the watch clanged like distant anvils. Bronze cuirasses striking stone, boot heel to flagstaff, the brisk bark of orders delivered in half a dozen tongues. Ser Jorah Mormont emerged from the shadows of the tower stairwell, cloaked in supple gray wool lined with black bear fur. He moved deferentially, but no man in King's Landing doubted that the Bear Knight could stride these ramparts unchallenged. The gold cloaks honored him as Lord Commander in all but name, and the Unsullied nodded when he passed, recognizing the sure weight of command. "You are up before the sun," Daenerys said, her breath pluming in the chill. "Dreams," Jorah answered. "I woke you." "No, the dreams did." She turned to him, the first light touching the silver of her hair. "Rhaego kicked hard enough to rattle my bones." His expression softened. "He grows stronger. Soon the realm will hear him before it sees him." They shared a quiet moment, listening to the city stir awake. Peddlers hawking fresh bread near Cobbler's Square, ravens croaking for scraps atop the rookery spires, a distant bell clanging at the docks of the narrow sea. Somewhere on the wind, thin and trembling, rose the piper's refrain of the Bear and the Maiden Fair, rendered oddly reverent by the hour. "How fares the small council?" she asked finally. "Tyrell roses wilt in frost," Jorah replied. "Lord Mace believes Highgarden should collect 1/10 of all tolls north of Bitterbridge for its loyal support." Varys sniffed out the scheme. Ser Barristan counseled patience. Daenerys inhaled the cold, thinking, "And you?" "I counseled a tighter purse string. The Reach must help feed the Crownlands without special favors. Highgarden's harvests were plentiful, they can spare grain." "They can," she agreed. She placed a hand upon the balcony rail, feeling the stone's icy bite. "Send word that the Tyrell levy will be 200,000 bushels to the crown granaries. No exemptions." "You're about, as you command." Her glance flicked north, beyond the red roofs and wisps of mist on the Blackwater, to where the King's Road vanished among rolling hills. "Have we heard from the north?" Maester Aemon's ravens report growing troubles beyond the wall. Hard winds, dead things moving under the aurora. Lord Commander Snow rides the wildling passes nightly. A ripple of fear tracked her spine. "And winter creeps closer." "So it does." Jorah rested one scarred hand over hers. "When you march, I ride at your side." "I know." The great hall that afternoon smelled of cedar smoke and clove-studded oranges. Minstrels tuned lutes near the dais while scribes arranged parchment stacks beside the high seat once forged for Aegon the Conqueror. The Iron Throne's barbs glittered like frost-sheen thorns. Around the cavernous chamber 100 nobles murmured. Lord Edric Storm in cobalt satin, Lady Winifred Manderly draped in sea-green silk, Prince Trystane Martell wearing desert orange. Across the mosaic floor stood Tyrion Lannister, newly appointed hand, his golden brooch a lion's paw cupping 3 obsidian dragons. Daenerys descended the throne steps with the slow grace of prophecy. Her gown of black velvet brushed the granite, its sleeves stitched with pearls in the shape of dragon talons. At her left walked Ser Barristan Selmy, white cloak trailing like fresh snowfall. At her right strode Ser Jorah, his sword belt studded with polished jet. She paused beside Tyrion, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, then faced the assembly. "Lords and ladies," she began, voice carrying beyond the mantled archways. "I summoned you to speak of debts, those paid, those owed, and those yet earned." A hush fell. The crackle of torches seemed deafening. She gestured to Tyrion. "My hand will name estates burdened by Lannister war taxes. In the first year of my reign, these levies are forgiven. Coin wrung from broken backs buys no loyalty." Murmurs, some grateful, some skeptical. She raised a palm, silence obeyed. "Yet know this, a mother's mercy walks hand in hand with a dragon's justice. Should any lord hoard grain while children starve, should any knight prey upon the helpless, my dragons shall know their names." 3 high-arched windows behind the dais opened to sky and sun. On cue, Drogon's silhouette eclipsed the light, vast wings casting jagged shadows across the hall. Lords gasped, ladies clutched their pearls. Drogon banked away with a throaty shriek like grinding iron. Ser Jorah surveyed the crowd, keen eyes reading their hearts. None missed the warning. After the lords withdrew, the small council gathered in the solar. Tyrion sprawled in a cushioned chair, refilling his cup with arbor red. "You cowed them nicely, your grace. In Flea Bottom, they're already calling you Daenerys the Even-Handed. And Daenerys the Terrible, depending which tavern you frequent." Daenerys inclined her head. "I shall answer to both if it keeps bellies full." Varys fluttered a lavender-scented handkerchief. "Full bellies breed contentment, yet rumblings arise from the Iron Islands. The Kraken stirs once more. Victarion Greyjoy?" Jorah asked. "I fear so." Tyrion tapped a finger on the rim of his goblet. "Reports of a new priestess of the drowned god. She claims a leviathan will rise to swallow dragons whole." Ser Barristan snorted. "Priestesses rarely win sea battles." Daenerys steepled fingers. "Still, we must not let rebellion fester." "Ser Jorah, how many ships can sail within a fortnight?" 60 war galleys, 20 grain carriers, 5 new Dromons. Enough to remind Pike who rules the waves. "Choose commanders you trust," she said. "The fleet sails under your banner." A flicker of surprise crossed Tyrion's face. "You're about. Your will, my queen." That evening, candles guttered low in Daenerys' bedchamber. Silk hangings drifted in the faint breeze from a narrow arrow slit. She leaned against Jorah, both seated on the edge of the hearthstone. Shadows danced across their faces, dragon-shaped and uncertain. "When you take the fleet," she murmured, "you leave me without my shield. You will have the Unsullied and Ser Barristan. They are worth armies, yet not you." Jorah brushed silver hair from her brow. "My heart will anchor here, even when my ship crests the sunset sea. You speak as if you may never return." "I will return, but war is a dice game. A sword's kiss may claim me before I see your son born." She gripped his wrist. "Then promise that if death seeks you, you will tell him to wait. Wait until Rhaego laughs at his first jest. Wait until he walks the throne room with a wooden sword. Wait until he forgets the sound of war." Jorah's throat tightened. "I promise." She drew him down beside the hearth, kissed his weathered cheek, and rested her head against his shoulder as the flames dwindled to embers. They sat so long that night they heard the scullions begin before dawn, pans clattering in the distant kitchens, the scratch of straw brooms on stone corridors, the kingdom waking once again to fragile peace. 3 days later, bare night banners flapped above the masts of the royal fleet. Black sails bore the sigil of House Targaryen, but on every forecastle masthead flew a gray pennon emblazoned with a paw print, the mark of Jorah Mormont's command. Daenerys stood at the river pier flanked by Missandei of Noth and Grey Worm. The water lapped icy at the pilings, beads of sunlight shattering on each crest. Jorah knelt before her, helm under one arm. "I leave with honor. I return with victory." "Take your time returning," she said, smiling through the ache. "Let the Krakens tire of waiting." He might have kissed her hand, but they both sensed onlooking eyes, nobles, septons, whisperers scribbling details for half-price broadsheets. Instead, he clasped her fingers once, stood, and strode up the gangplank to the Drummond sea smoke. The mooring ropes fell, oars dipped, sails blossomed. The fleet glided into the blackwater like a string of steel-backed swans. From the quarterdeck, Jorah lifted a fist to his heart. Daenerys pressed both palms over her womb as though offering his gesture to the child inside. The ships vanished beyond the estuary bend, leaving only the echo of horns and the faint flutter of gray pennons against a sky too large to bear. Weeks scrolled past like pages in a windstorm. Daenerys met daily with Tyrion, unraveling debts, replacing corrupt sheriffs, dispatching grain to famine-scarred Cracklaw Point. She toured the September of Baelor, ignoring the High Septon's thinly veiled sermon about foreign queens, and pardoned 36 sparrows condemned for heresy. When a gaggle of court ladies begged to see a dragon hatchling, she introduced them to Viserion atop the Dragonbit Hill, an event that left silk-robed women shrieking with delight and Lannister guards blanching white as bone. Yet each twilight, she returned to her chambers and opened Jorah's letters. They arrived by raven, smudged ink on salt-stained parchment, bearing tales of storm-lashed seas and iron-born reavers. He wrote of boarding raids at night, iron-born axes glinting under pale moons, of seasmoke's ballistae launching pots of wildfire that turned the surf emerald and roaring. He told her of typhoons near Pebbleton, of lanternfish glowing beneath keels, of the haunting bell toll from the drowned castle of 10 Towers as it slipped beneath the waves, dragged down by sorcery, the sailors whispered. Each letter ended the same. My queen, each dawn brings me one day closer to your side. Until then, dream of calm seas. She kept the letters under her pillow. Some nights she dreamed of calm seas, others of Jorah's blood on pale sand. And once she dreamed of blue eyes swirling in darkness, a cold so deep her unborn son kicked in terror. She woke gasping, vowing to heed the North's ravens sooner than later. On the 53rd day after Jorah's departure, Tyrion burst into the solar with a scroll clenched in hand. Dark wings, darker words. Daenerys felt her throat tighten. The fleet. Safe, he wheezed, catching breath. But you must read. She tore the crimson seal, a kraken strangled by a bear's claw. Jorah's careful script unfurled. The islanders invoked storms of black magic. Leviathan proved no fable, some monstrous beast from the deeps, bound in chains of coral, thrashing beneath Pike's cliffs. Our ballistae could not pierce its hide. So I landed at Seastrand with 200 men, scaled the sea tower, and slew their priestess myself. Her death shattered the chains, the creature sank, roaring, and the sea swallowed it. Pike bends the knee. Yet there is a cost I would not pay again. Half our galleys splintered against shoals, and Captain Morio of Bravos fell with them. I give you victory, but not without grief. I sail for home at once. A postscript hastily scrawled, north winds howl beyond the Iron Man's stronghold. Their fishermen speak of whites walking the shore at dusk. Winter's teeth are longer than I feared. Prepare, my queen. I ride for you and Rigo, but winter rides faster. She lowered the letter, heart-lurching. See that the city's smiths work day and night forging dragoglass arrowheads. Summon every blacksmith within 200 leagues. Tyrion blinked. Dragonglass? You found a mine. 3 near Dragonstone's smoking vent. I want the stockpiles melted and recast by winter's first frost. Castle-forged obsidian is brittle. We must try. Missandei lingered at the doorway. Shall I send ravens to Winterfell? Send ravens to every lord from Dorne to White Harbor, Daenerys said. Tell them the Night's Watch fights its greatest war. Tell them winter came to the wall and found the dead waiting. The ravens flew. Replies returned slow, uncertain. Some lords pledged troops, others demanded proof. Within King's Landing, tongues wagged, the Silver Queen takes counsel from ghost stories. Ser Jorah gone too long, his seat beside the throne cold as northern stone. A rumor sprang that she would name a Dornish prince hand in Tyrion's place. Another whispered that she would wed Jon Snow to unify ice and fire. Daenerys ignored them all, focusing on stockpiles, on marshalling crossbowmen, on readying grain caravans to march north with her army. Yet as the moon waned thrice, she felt the first pangs of childbirth shake her belly. Maester Gormund insisted she remain in the capital until the babe was born. Tyrion argued the same, wagging his parchment-inked stump of quill. You cannot gallop to the end of the world in labor. Kings make heirs, but queens must bear them. Beneath the great September sun-drenched dome, Daenerys spent her days pacing tiled corridors, restless as a dragonling inside an eggshell. Then, one clouded morning, a horn sounded at Dragongate. Grey Worm hurried to her side. Ser Jorah approaches. She descended the steps too fast for decorum, skirts hissing along marble. At the gate, she found Seasmoke's crew disembarking, battered helms, scorched shields, torn pennons, yet eyes bright with triumph. Jorah dismounted, helm tucked beneath his arm. He bore a new scar tracing his left cheek, but his smile was hail. My queen. She rushed to him, arms sliding around his waist. He wrapped her gently, mindful of the swelling curve of her belly. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the thunder of 2 racing hearts. When she pulled back, tears glittered on her lashes. You kept death waiting. Only because I lost the dice, he teased. He grows. He laid a hand atop her stomach. Rigo kicked as if in greeting. She grasped his fingers. "Winter gathers. Ride with me. Now and always." The royal procession north began under banners of black and red snapping against pewter skies. For 1,000 unsullied marched with lockstep precision, their spiked helms reflecting pallid light. Legions of Reach archers followed, capes embroidered with golden roses. Dornish spearmen rode lean sandy coursers, Stormlander men-at-arms hefted warhammers etched with tridents, honoring their queen's birth at Dragonstone. Above, dragons wheeled. Drogon vast and thunderous, regal vibrant green gold, Viserion pale as dawn. Their shadows slithered across fields and frightened flocks scattered like white petals in their wake. Peasants knelt in muddy roadsides, some crossing themselves, others lifting babes skyward for a queen's blessing. At the columns 4 rode Daenerys on a pale mare, long cloak fur-lined and clasped with a dragonglass brooch. Ser Jorah rode just behind, his newly forged Valyrian steel sword, gift from House Tarly, gleaming with boiled leather grip. Tyrion rode a sturdy black pony named Penny, muttering that Winterfell lay too damned far for dwarfish thighs. They crossed the Trident in the bleak of first snow. Campfires dotted the western bank, orange halos punching holes in darkness. Daenerys stood near the water's edge while the quartermaster tallied rations. Snowflakes the size of moth wings drifted onto her hair, melting to drink the silver. She shivered involuntarily. Jorah's cloak settled upon her shoulders. "You forget your own warmth," he said. "Too many shoulders need cloaks," she answered. "I will not have my men freeze while I wear furs like a Myrish princess. Your son will not thank you if sickness steals you." She smiled faintly. "You speak with his voice already." Midnight came. She retired to her pavilion, Jorah standing guard outside the entrance. But within the canvas walls, labor pain clenched her abdomen. Maester Gormund was fetched, Missandei brought steaming cloth, Tyrion an iron kettle of boiling water, though he turned white at the scent of blood. Through the long night Daenerys labored, snow curdling into blizzard outside. The wind howled like wolves trying the tent seams. She cried once, not in pain but in memory of a blood-soaked spouse, of a pyre rebirth, and then bit down on the memory until iron filled her mouth. At dawn, as the horizon smoldered blood-red, a child's wail pierced the blizzard. Rhaego Targaryen was born with a crown of dark curls and eyes the color of summer sky. Maester Gormund declared mother and babe healthy, though childbirth had stolen all color from Daenerys' cheeks. Ser Jorah entered when permitted. He knelt at the bedside, tears unchecked. "He is a prince of both dragon and bear," he whispered. "May he know both fire and fortitude." Daenerys placed the infant in his arms. Jorah cradled the child as though fashioned of snowflake glass. Rhaego's tiny fingers curled around the night-scarred thumb. Something inside Jorah broke quietly, like a frozen twig. He bowed his head, pressing lips to the child's brow. In that kiss he swore oaths no maester would ever record, oaths deeper than knighthood, stronger than blood. They resumed the march 10 days later, snow-heavy but passable. The king's road became a white ribbon beneath steel hooves. Trees loomed black and skeletal, their limbs crusted with rime. Jorah insisted Daenerys ride the enclosed wagon gifted by the Dornish, its cedar interior lined with warm pelts, a small brazier secured by iron brackets. She relented, though each mile rattled her bones and jostled the tiny prince asleep in her arms. Scouts brought grim tidings, holdfasts along the road left deserted, livestock frozen to fence posts, patches of ice slick with blackened blood. A lone survivor found near Acorn Hall babbled of pale figures in tattered mail devouring his kin. Grey Worm tightened outrider patrols, regal sword ahead, fiery breath scorching potential ambush sites. As the column approached Moat Cailin, the snows deepened waist-high. The crumbling First Men fortresses jutted from drifts like broken black teeth. Fires burned among the ruins, wildlings under Tormund Giant's bane had made camp there, awaiting the Queen's arrival. Jon Snow himself met the column, black cloak rimed with frost, Valyrian steel longsword long claw at his hip. He bowed. "Winterfell welcomes the Queen of Dragons." His gaze lingered on the child nestled against her, compassion warming like brandy. "And the prince." Later, within the ancient wooden walls of Winterfell's great hall, Jon briefed the council. Bran Stark sat in a wheeled chair near the hearth, eyes seeming to look beyond flame and stone to distant realms. Sansa Stark presided at the high seat, red hair braided with northern wolf tooth. "The dead mass at last hearth," Jon said. "Thousands. This long night will be darker than the world remembers." "I have fire," Daenerys answered. "And dragonglass. Fire alone is not enough." Bran's voice drifted eerie, distant. There is a mind guiding the storm, a Night King. He seeks to unmake what the children made. He will come for me. Jorah frowned. If we kill him? His army shatters, Bran replied. But he will not come unless I stand vulnerable. Daenerys bristled. You would offer yourself as bait? Bran lifted ancient eyes. I would offer myself as key to the lock. A tense silence followed. Snow hissed against shutters, wind moaning in the tower flues. Jorah stepped forward, laying maps upon the trestle. We fortified the Godwood. Dragonglass stakes, wildfire trenches. The Unsullied ring the inner ward, the Northmen the outer. Archers along the battlements. Drogon and Rhaegal strike the flanks while Viserion guards the crypts with smaller bursts. Tyrion tapped the map. If the Night King truly directs the horde, he won't risk hovering beneath open dragonfire. Someone must draw him close. All eyes returned to Bran. The boy nodded once. Daenerys inhaled, chest tight. Then I stand with you. Jon objected, Sansa protested, Ser barrassed and counseled caution, but Daenerys' resolve sparked harder than dragonglass. I will not hide while my people bleed. Ser Jorah bowed his head. Where the queen stands, her sworn sword stands. The eve of battle dawned unnatural. Sky bruised a deep amethyst, stars swallowed by encroaching cloud. Snow fell in soft phantoms, muting the world to hush. In the castle ward, blacksmiths labored over bronze cauldrons, forging arrowheads of obsidian. Maesters brewed firepots laced with lamprey bile. The scent of iron and pitch soaked the air. Daenerys visited each barracks, the Unsullied lining spear shafts with dragonglass points. Dornish spearmen sharing wine flasks with wildling axemen. Glover pikemen sharpening steel until sparks whirled like dying fireflies. She spoke little, but her presence carried weight beyond words. In dim torchlight, men who knew only tavern songs whispered Valyrian prayers. Inside the Godswood, Bran waited in his weirwood cart beneath the giant heart tree, its red leaves fluttering like silent drums. Jorah supervised the trench diggers, directing them to pour thick wildfire slurry into channels. The green muck smoked where snowflakes died upon contact. When I give the word, he told Grey Worm, light the trenches, not before. Night descended, devouring the world inch by inch. Torches ringed Winterfell's walls in trembling halos. Distant horns moaned. 1, 2, 3 blasts. The dead. Daenerys mounted Drogon beyond the battlements. Night-cold air slashing her cheeks. Jorah, armored in blackened steel, climbed up behind her, an arrangement Drogon tolerated only from him. They soared into numbing air, wings thrumming. Below, the army of the dead spilled across snowy moors, a pale tide lit by starlight on ice-encrusted mail. In their midst glided the Night King on an undead ice WRM. Once a dragon, twisted, its wings cracked, blue fire flickering in its hollow chest. Viserion, Daenerys whispered, pain searing. Jorah's arm tightened around her. We end him tonight. They dove. Drogon's chest seethed. A furnace coiled in bone. He loosed a torrent of flame white-hot, scorching a trench across the undead ranks. Skeleton shields melted. Whites crumpled to ash, but at the army's heart, the Night King raised a blue-gloved hand. A wave of cold rippled, snow spiraled upward, Drogon's fire guttered, turned to steam. The Night King's WIRM shrieked, releasing a beam of azure flame that sheared a tower spire to molten rubble. Drogon banked sharply, Jorah nearly lost his seat. Icefire grazed their tail, scales cracking with frost. They regained height above the inner ward. Below, Jon Snow's cavalry clashed with white giants near the broken outer wall. Ghost, the dire wolf, leapt, jaws closing on a giant's throat while its eyes burned sky blue. Jon's Valyrian steel sliced through ribs, black blood spraying across snow. Grey Worm signaled, archers ignited flaming arrows, the wildfire trenches roared to life, a serpent of emerald encircling the castle. For a moment the dead recoiled. Then white shapes leapt into the flames, heedless of pain, forming bridges of smoldering bodies. The horde pressed on. Daenerys wheeled Drogon back toward the Godwood. Bran waited alone save for Theon Greyjoy and a dozen Ironborn archers. Shadows danced across gnarled roots as petals drifted slow. Jorah knew the Night King would come here. He leapt from Drogon's back as the dragon swooped low. Guard her, he told Drogon, a fool's command, yet the beast rumbled assent. Daenerys landed lightly, blade drawn. Jorah faced her. If he comes, let me engage first. I ride dragons, sire, not benches. Blue mist slithered into the clearing. Ice creaked, the heart tree's eyes wept sap like blood. The Night King stepped from shadow, armor shimmering with frost rune filigree. In one hand he carried a spear of black ice, jagged and humming. His gaze fixed on Bran. Theon's archers loosed, shafts shattered on unseen wards. Theon charged, spear in both hands, screaming for Yara. The Night King caught the spear, broke it, and pierced Theon's chest with a sliver of ice. Theon collapsed. Daenerys lunged. Her Valyrian steel rack clanged against the Night King's chilled blade, sparks of frost and ember scattering. He moved with preternatural speed, parrying her strike, twisting to thrust at her heart. Jorah interposed, longsword intercepting the ice spear. The clash rang like cracking glacier. They traded blows in frenetic silence, frost plume meeting dragonfire steel, each clash a burst of steam. Jorah's strength began to ebb, the Night King fought tireless. A sweep of the ice spear raked Jorah's thigh, slicing mail, blood-beading scarlet on snow. Daenerys slashed the Night King's helm, sending shards flying, but the wound sealed with chilling wind. The Night King stabbed, Jorah shoved Daenerys aside. The spear drove through his breastplate, black ice lancing his heart. Daenerys screamed. Jorah's eyes met hers, pain and devotion and a plea all tangled in frozen breath. He seized the spear shaft, holding the Night King locked. "Burn," he rasped. Drogon descended in a cyclone of wings, flooding the godwood with fire. The Night King's ice armor cracked, his flesh ignited in azure flame resisting orange tongues. Daenerys drew the dragonglass dagger at her belt, its hilt carved like a twisting bear claw, and plunged it into the Night King's chest above the spear. Frost exploded outward, shards slicing bark. A howl rose, wind torn through cavern mouth, and the Night King shattered like obsidian glass touched by Smith's hammer, chunks scattering, melting to puddles. Across the battlefield, every white stiffened, then collapsed, marionette strings cut. Silence consumed Winterfell, broken only by the pop of dying wildfire. Daenerys cradled Jorah. Blood soaked her hands, steaming in cold air. "Stay," she whispered, tears burning. He smiled faintly. "My watch is done." "No," she pressed her forehead to his. "The child needs you. Then teach him better." He coughed, crimson flecked his lip. "Teach him to be kind." His hand found hers. He squeezed once. Then his breath left in a sigh that frosted in the air and vanished. Drogon keened, a rumble shaking snow from branches. Daenerys rocked, grief a hurricane of ash and longing. Bran's voice floated gentle, he kept every promise. She looked at the broken spear, at the shattered ice, at the crimson blooming across white. Something within her hardened, a shell around newborn pain. She kissed Jorah's brow, closed his eyes. "Bear Knight," she said, "your queen releases you." The battle ended, dawn crawled over the eastern ridge, gray and bloodless. Survivors stumbled through corpses of friend and foe alike. Jon knelt by Daenerys' side, silent. Tyrion wept openly, though he tried to hide it in the crook of his elbow. Unsullied formed a solemn ring, helms held against chests. Daenerys rose, Jorah's sword in her hands. She sheathed it at her hip. "He will not be burned," she declared. "He will be laid in the crypts beside the king's guard he equals." No voice spoke against her. And when the pyres were lit for the fallen whites, Ser Jorah Mormont's body was borne into Winterfell's ancient crypt, guarded by stone wolves and carved kings. Daenerys placed a single winter rose upon his breast, a flower plucked from the parapet where their journey north had begun. Then she laid her babe atop his chest for one silent heartbeat, for father and son who shared no blood yet shared everything, and carried Rhaego out into newborn sun. Seasons turned. Spring unfurled shy shoots from snow-swept fields. Rhaego crawled along Myrini's carpets in the reconstructed Red Keep, his laughter chasing memories' ghosts. Each morning, Daenerys watched him reach for sunbeams and saw Jorah's steadfast gaze in the boy's wondering eyes. In the council chamber, a new chair stood beside the throne, carved of weirwood, its back shaped like entwined bear and dragon. On its seat rested Jorah's sword, a daily reminder that some shields never truly lower. Bards sang of the Bear Knight, telling how a single vow endured exile, dragons, krakens, and death itself. Small folk painted sigils of bear paws encircled by three-headed dragons on stable doors, charms against betrayal. In the north, fishermen spoke of a ghostly bear striding the mists at dawn, watching ships safely to harbor. And in Daenerys' dreams, Jorah sometimes walked the balcony at dusk, rain in his hair, cloak smelling of cedar and sea. He said nothing, only smiled at her, and the child nestled in her arms. She would wake with tears upon her cheeks, but they tasted sweet as honey. For she knew promises kept outlive the men who swear them, and love, unbroken by betrayal, tempered by sacrifice, can shift empires and outlast winter itself. Morning sun swept over the bay like a painter's glaze, kindling 1,000 ripples with molten copper. From the terrace of the Maiden's Tower, Daenerys watched gulls arc low across the water, their cries mingling with the distant clamor of dockworkers and the hollow clang of shipwright hammers. Meereen's harbor had never been so alive. Black-hulled dramans from King's Landing jostled beside Braavosi cogs, Dornish wine runners, and squat fishing luggers newly painted with the crown-bear sigil of the royal fleet. Farther out, the three dragons circled on wide, lazy thermals, casting looping shadows over hulls and rigging. The city's children raced along the breakwater below, shrieking in delight each time Drogon's silhouette swallowed the sun. Daenerys leaned against a marble balustrade veined with lapis, feeling the sea breeze tease loose strands of silver from her braid. Her chambers here were smaller than the Red Keep's royal suite, and Old Harpy Eyrie turned to living quarters. But they overlooked the whole port, and the rising scent of brine and spice reminded her of the night she had first set foot on Pentoshi soil so many years ago. Across the terrace, Prince Rhaego giggled where Missandei knelt beside him, coaxing a wooden wyvern through the air in wobbly loops. The boy, scarcely 2, already bore the rangy limbs of a natural rider. He clambered anything that would hold his weight, strutted with fearless gait, and cackled when Drogon roared overhead as if the mighty beast performed solely for his amusement. His eyes, Targaryen violet flecked with the faintest hint of green, trapped the morning like polished amethysts, so bright that even her darkest days seemed to thin and fray in their light. A faint footstep sounded. Daenerys turned to find Grey Worm at the archway, immaculate in dusk blue linen, spear grounded politely. He inclined his head. "Your Grace, council waits in the Temple of Graces." 3 ships arrived from Lys at dawn. Their captains beg audience. Refugees or tradesmen? Both, they claim. Storms shattered the pirate step, plague follows in their wake. She nodded, though the thought of plague clinging to hull planks tightened her chest. Long months of rebuilding had taught hard truths. Victory promised little peace if disease, famine, or greed filled the void left by war. "See that they are housed on Breakwater Island till the healers examine them," she said. "No slave collars, no chains. Lysine hands once built half the palaces here. They will find honest labor again if their health is sound." Grey Worm thumped a fist to chest. "It shall be done. And the children? Fed first. Warm soup, boiled linen. Good." She paused, glancing back to her son. "Summon Lord Tyrion and Archon Morgause to meet me by the Sundial Garden after council. I wish to discuss the canal tariff." "As you command." Grey Worm faded down the corridor like a silent tide, the faint hiss of his greaves lost beneath gull cries. Missandei rose, setting the wyvern aside, and carried Rhaego over. The prince kicked stubby boots, reaching for his mother. Daenerys lifted him, breathing in the milk-sweet scent of toddler curls. Draped over his shoulders hung a miniature cloak stitched from shaggy gray bear fur. Ser Barristan had commissioned it as a name-day gift, explaining it was what a true Mormont cub would wear to feast. The irony twisted Daenerys' heart, but she tolerated no tears in daylight, not here where the wind belonged to sailors and orphans and to the memory of a man who swore to keep her smiling. "Look, Rhaego," she whispered, guiding his tiny hand toward the harbor skyline. "Each mast is a story. Someday you'll know them all." The boy gurgled, eyes snagging on an ibex figurehead gilded bright as sunrise. Daenerys kissed his cheek, and for a heartbeat the world tasted of salt and honey and tomorrow's quiet promise. The Temple of Graces stood at Meereen's heart like a blossom carved from bone, towering alabaster petals, each etched with the sigils of the free cities and scarred by half-melted chains that once tethered slaves. Inside, pillars soared to an oculus where pale daylight shafted down in a single celestial lance. The council chamber, once a pit where masters auctioned flesh, had been filled with hammered bronze benches and a circular mosaic floor depicting the swift river Skahazadin winding toward the sea. Around the ring sat Ac, Ongress of tongues and tempers, Tycho Nestoris of the Iron Bank, stoic behind ledger tablets, Jalabar Ho in feathered cloak, representing the displaced Summer Islands, Archon Morgause of Astapor, scarred yet steadfast. Lady Winifred Manderley freshly arrived on a tall ship festooned with wolf and mermaid banners. Even Prince Trystane Martell, sunburst brooch flashing, had made the voyage to ink new trade pacts. At Daenerys' entrance, voices quieted like harp strings plucked mute. She advanced to the central dais where stood a low table of Targaryen blackwood inlaid with weathered bone, a relic dredged from Valyria's smoking shore. Beside her paced Drogon in miniature. The dragon had grown monstrous since Winterfell, but inside the hall she kept him scaled down to man's height by binding words, old magics gleaned from Karth alchemists, and soul aspect by the chainless priests. The spell cost her a pinch of strength each hour, yet it allowed others to breathe near the beast without quaking. Even so, the table screens rattled whenever Drogon exhaled, his ember-laden breath curling through incised vents in the roof. Tyrion Lannister rose first, parchments fluttering like pale moths in his fist. "Your Grace, we convened to discuss 3 matters: the Lysine Asylum, the Canal Tariff, and the unsolved murders near the Weaver's Quarter." Daenerys signaled the Lysine captains forward, gaunt men, salt-tangled beards, knees quivering as they knelt. They recounted storms, an outbreak of shaking sickness, and pirates sacking their warehouses when the plague kept healthy defenders locked indoors. Several hundred souls huddled in their holds seeking safe moorage. "Quarantine," Archon Morgause argued, tapping one tarnished finger upon a ledger. "If plague surfaces, trade dies with it." Tycho's cool gaze slid sideways. "The Iron Bank remembers the basilisk fever that emptied Tyrash's coffers in a fortnight." Daenerys listened, weighing risk against compassion. Memories flickered, chains clinking behind her steps in Astapor's market. Jorah's voice cautioning that mercy measured poorly against empty stomachs. She lifted a hand for silence. "The Listens will camp on Breakwater Isle under Healer Kithri's ward. Grain and fresh water shall be provided. Those who test clean may enter the city after 30 days' watch. The Crown will finance this with my own purse if need be." Tycho bowed shallowly. The Iron Bank expected such pledges repaid twofold, but she had learned to wield debt as deftly as flame. Morgause looked ready to protest, yet Drogon's tail flicked sparks against polished marble. The Archon swallowed his objection. They next debated the Skahazaden Canal Tariff, a slender toll imposed on every hull that passed through the dredged channel linking the hinterland grain belts to the harbor. Tyrion proposed doubling it. Lady Winifred demurred, citing winter stores in the north still running thin. Prince Trystane suggested a sliding scale, warships taxed double, fishing craft half. The exchange swirled, voices parrying with quills and fractions. At length Daenerys cut through the numbers with Jorah's favorite measure, justice tempered by utility. "Trade thrives on fortune's wind," she pronounced. "Let not the crown erect windbreaks in fertile soil. We maintain the toll at present rate through next harvest. Review revenues then." Heads nodded, quills scratched amendments. Drogon yawned, revealing red gold fangs like molten scythes. A nervous cough skittered across the benches. The murders proved thornier. For free-folk, women had been found near the Weaver's Quarter, throats cut, scalps removed. Rumor-hungry tongues whispered red priestesses and blood magic. Others blamed the sons of the Harpy reborn. Grey Worm briefed. Each body bore a small coin placed upon the tongue, stamped with a crescent skull unknown to Myrinese mints. Archon Morgause feared it signaled a new cult. Tycho fretted lost prophet. Jalabar Ho muttered of shadowbinders. Daenerys studied the coin under lamplight, its metal dull as dried blood, edges sharpened to razor fineness. She traced the skull, noting the crescent shaped like a rising moon. Somewhere, in half-remembered scrolls Jorah once read while camped on the Dothraki Sea, she had glimpsed that symbol. Yes, the Order of the Long Night, a zealot sect in Norvos worshipping death's twilight. They preached that only sacrifice would keep Winter's jaws from sealing the world again. "We track the Minters," she ordered. Grey Worm stationed quiet eyes at the river forges. Master of Whispers, she glanced to Varys, who had slithered in mid-session like a pale spider. "Your little birds will pluck any exiles of Norvos from alleys and wharf pipes. I want names before next moon turns." Varys bowed with faint smile. "The Song of Skulls shall not reach second verse, Your Grace." The council dispersed into eddies of parchment and whispered alliances. Drogon unfurled wings and glided behind Daenerys as she exited, children scurrying clear of his furnace glow. In the echoing colonnade, Tyrion hustled at her side. "A sound session, though I'd warrant half those lords still quake from your pet's balefire stare." "He's no pet," she said. "He's a promise." Tyrion grunted. Yes. The difference is lost on most." He smoothed his beard, gaze flicking to the listens filing out under unsullied escort. "If plague does seep ashore, the city may blame you." "Let them," she answered, voice steady as drawn steel. "Better blame than chains." They emerged into the sundial garden where sculpted columns cast hour-long shadows across tiled pathways. Rigo toddled among jasmine bushes, trailing Missandei in lively pursuit. He spotted Drogon, squealed, and waddled forward on unsteady legs. The dragon lowered his great head, rumbling soft. Tyrion's breath caught when the boy grasped a horned snout, giggling as scales twitched. No flame stirred, no teeth snapped. Only a low croon answered. Every maester in Old Town would faint, Tyrion murmured. A babe stroking a dragon's joy like a kitten. Maesters rarely lived near minefields of love, Daenerys said. She crouched, lifted Rhaego in her arms. One day you'll ride him. Fly, the child corrected solemnly, lisping on the F. Yes, she smiled. Fly. That night, torches dotted the terrace like fallen stars. Moonlight painted the sea slats of silver, and far below the din of taverns rose in drunken tides. Daenerys sat alone beside an onyx chessboard Jorah had carved during their sea voyage to Meereen, obsidian pieces shaped as dragons and bears and roses and krakens, each polished to mica sheen. She traced the White King, its wings half extended in poised ascent. Across the board, the Black Queen, bare-cloaked and sword-raised, advanced into empty squares again and again, yet never crossed the final row. Footsteps echoed. Ser Barristan, hair silver as river fog, bowed. Forgive the hour, my queen. A rider arrived from the northern capital. Urgent. He offered a sealed scroll. The wax bore the direwolf of House Stark entwined with a weirwood leaf. She broke it. Jon Snow's hand sketched hurried runes, wildling villages to west of the shivering sea reclaimed by ice, rumblings of quake under Frostfang Mountains, reports of strange pale trees sprouting overnight in patterns like runes across the snow. But of greatest import, Bran Stark's visions spoke of fissures in the wall's ancient spells. Though the Night King lay dead, other nameless powers pressed from beyond, seeking cracks. Jon requested dragon glass shipments, mages, and, if possible, Daenerys' presence come spring thaw. She stared at the letter long after the words blurred in moonlight. The war for Dawn had cost Jorah his breath, still the abyss whispered. She folded the parchment. Ser Barristan, prepare a courier answer. The crown will provide dragon glass, thaumaturges from Cartha's guild, and 70 unsullied as wardens. I leave Rhaego here until the risk of Frostfang passes. Barristan frowned gently. Your grace, the North's cold may burden you, wintering babe fresh at teat. Rhaego is strong, but I will not carry him into unknown peril. Meereen stands firm. You and Missandei I will watch him. She met his wizened eyes. You would guard him as you guarded Rhaegar once. His expression softened with old sorrow. A second chance, my queen. I will not fail him. She almost asked if he had ever failed the first prince, that ghost of her brother who sang of lyres and died near a river, crown shattered beneath Robert's hammer. But the question belonged to another life. She dismissed him with thanks. Alone again, she moved the Black Queen 1 square forward and laid it down with finality. Protect the king, she whispered to the night. A wisp of breeze stirred, carrying a scent of cinnamon bark, Jorah's favorite tea, and for a heartbeat she imagined him leaning behind her, murmuring, trade less in prophecy, more in patience. She smiled, eyes shining wet. They sailed 2 weeks later on a fast Braavosi carrack named the Quiet Sister, its hull waxed sleek, masts rigged with scarlet sails embroidered in high Valyrian script, light and dark. The crew were half Karth mage engineers, half North-trained naval marines loyal to Jon. Cargo holds brimmed with dragonglass spearheads packed in straw, kegs of Myrish wildfire, for ice fought best with twin extremes, and crates of dream wine requested by Maester Samwell Tarly for research into collective vision. Drogon refused all but sky travel, shadowing the sisters' wake in vast circles. Rhaego remained in Meereen to guard Rhaego, Viserion perched on the carrack's forward spar like a living figurehead, his pale scales flickering aurora. Daenerys traveled with Grey Worm, 12 unsullied shield-bearers, Tyrion, who insisted he'd freeze to death in King's Landing anyway, and Melara of Karth, a dreamsmith adept at weaving protective wards. The voyage north was swift at first. Warm winds propelled them past Pentos, past the smoking ruins of Valyria where molten rivers glowed in nightshade red. Tyrion offered sardonic toasts each time the sisters skirted whirlpools belching sulfur. Melara whispered chants to tether dragons' hearts firm against the doom's lingering curse. Yet beyond Dragonstone, the sea changed temper, currents slowed, waves sloshed with leaden fatigue, and odd patches of water glimmered like frozen glass though the air stayed salt damp. The sisters skated across such pools with eerie silence, hull groaning as if fear had weight. On the 4th night, a sailor's scream shivered up the mast. Daenerys rushed to the stern deck. Ahead, shapes bobbed between ice floes, rafts perhaps or wreckage. But as the moon peered from cloud, she saw they were not driftwood. They were human forms, skin blue-veined, each corpse bound upright to crooked stakes hammered into cracked ice. eyelids sewn with iron thread, mouths distended as though mid-scream. Upon every tongue lay the same crescent skull coin. Tyrion paled, hands straying for a dagger he rarely used. Death's gospel travels fast. Grey Worm ordered the deck ballistae loaded. Flames flickered along coral tips. Melara murmured that dead spells sometimes rode water like leeches. Best to burn them before their hate found breath. Daenerys nodded. Viserion lifted from the prow with a shriek, exhaling a thin, precise jet of dragon flame that ignited the ice field. Bodies crackled, snapping like pine knots. Green fire danced along the melting flows, and the sister passed through curtains of steam as though sailing from one world to the next. The next morning, the sea turned slate and the wind vanished. Sails slack, the crew resorted to oars. Even Drogon's circling shadow shrank as cold stole thermals. Melara called it the breathless belt, an ancient hush where ocean met sky in silent treaty and where spells of old wove knots in travelers' minds. Speak little, she counseled, lest words freeze on tongues and fall to water. For 2 days they rowed, the only sound the creak of oarlocks and the occasional flick of spray against hull. On the dawn of the third, a faint rumble echoed westward. At first Daenerys thought thunder, then she saw a plume of white rising along the horizon like a newborn mountain. The breath in her chest crystallized. She had beheld this once before, the day the wall cracked under the Night King's dragonfire and 700 leagues of ice moaned as if alive. Tyrion followed her gaze, his lips drew tight. Another breach? He whispered. Or a quake, she replied, though dread answered loud. They shifted course toward Eastwatch by the sea, where Jon had gone to reinforce crumbling spells. Drogon banked overhead, sensing urgency, his roar rolling like drumbeats across the still water. They sighted land that evening, ragged cliffs crusted with new ice, waves sloshing thick as porridge. Eastwatch's beacon tower still stood, flame-guttering, but the outer palisade lay flattened under a sheet of glazed frost. Snow whipped sideways in barbed gusts. As the sister anchored in the cove, figures emerged atop the quay, men wrapped in black fur cloaks, white dire wolf banners rippling. Jon Snow descended stone steps, Longclaw glittering on his hip. His face bore fresh lines, eyes shadowed by nights of sleepless dawn. He clasped Daenerys' forearms in greeting. The sea froze under full suns, he said without preamble. A rift opened beneath the wall near the gorge. Bran felt something push from the far side, something not yet through. Daenerys laid a hand against Drogon's flank, absorbing his restless heat. If it breaches, we close it. Together. Jon's gaze flicked to Tyrion, to Grey Worm's silent phalanx, to Melara whose eyes glimmered with luminous glyphs. We've forged wards of dragon lass, but they crack each night. Whatever presses is heavier than ice alone. Melara stepped forward, voice soft. Some ancient essences feed on doorways. If the wall spells falter, that hunger will widen the hole. Then we starve it, Daenerys said. They rode inland beneath a sky choked with violet cloud. Drogon soared ahead, scouting with firelight plume. The land beyond the wall, once a blur of ghostlands and snow dunes, had grown uncanny. Frost flowers bloomed in perfect spirals, their petals delicate as whispers. Obelisks of ice jutted from drifts, faces smooth as glass, reflecting twisted images of those who passed. At dusk they reached the gorge, a canyon scar slicing the world from east to west. There, the wall arched overhead like a frozen bridge, and at its base gaped a fissure wide enough for 2 wagons. Cold bled from its throat in pulses, each blast carrying the faint odor of dust long undisturbed. Jon's engineers had built barricades of timber and stone, lined with dragoglass spikes. Black brothers stood atop pallets, crossbows trained. Torches burned blue in the airless chill. From within the fissure seeped a fluttering sound, half-wind, half-distant whisper, as though something within spoke in skittering tongues of ice. Daenerys approached the gap, Drogon crouched behind, wings mantled. She heard it then, a voice like snapping icicles, chanting fragmented words. Memory stabbed, Jorah's body cooling in her arms, Winterfell lit by pyre glow. She clenched fists. Melara drew twin orbs of smoked crystal from her satchel, placing one on each side of the breach. They pulsed with internal ember. We mirror fire reflection, she explained. Dragon heat to seal the fracture. But we need anchor of living flame. Daenerys stepped forward. Jon caught her elbow. You just crossed half the world. Let me. She shook her head. My blood is fire made. She pressed her palm to the icy lip, frost hissed and retreated. Prepare your men. If shadows pour forth, cut them down. Drogon and I will fill the gap. She mounted the dragon, skin prickling where scales met saddle. Drogon inhaled, chest convex with scorching breath. She urged him toward the breach, hovering as wind gyrated. Then she whispered in High Valyrian for the bear who held the spear. Fire erupted, a torrent bright as dawn, pouring into the fissure, licking stone, melting layered centuries of ice. Melara's orbs ignited, reflecting flame inward, doubling, tripling intensity. Cracks spidered outward but closed molten behind Drogon's seer. Yet from deep within the gorge, something shrieked, an ear-rending wail that rattled ribs. Shadows clawed toward the opening, silhouettes of creatures with too many limbs, eyes burning pale. Jon signaled. Arrows of dragoglass flew, impaling the first forms that breached molten curtains. They burst into shards of starlight, fading. For hours dragon flame roared until the gorge filled with slag, then stone, then vapored steam. Finally, the crack fused to a seamless wall of obsidian glass shimmering under starlight. Melara collapsed, crystal orbs smoldering beneath her palms. Drogon landed, smoke streaming from nostrils. Silence fell. Snow drifted, hesitant. Jon exhaled clouded breath. It holds. Daenerys slid from the saddle, knees trembling. Jon caught her. Grey Worm planted the Targaryen sigil in slushy ground. Black brothers cheered hoarsely. And somewhere above, a star shot across heaven, silver needles stitching sky to earth. They lingered one moon cycle, testing the seal. No further shivers came. The frost flowers withered, the obelisks cracked. On the 30th dawn, Bran Stark arrived astride a palanquin sleigh pulled by pale elk. He touched gloved hand to the obsidian wall, eyes rolling white, and declared the doorway closed, for now, and for a long time if hope is watered. Daenerys knew hope demanded vigilant gardeners. She left a garrison of unsullied, 8 dreamsmiths, and a hatchling egg gifted from Drogon's last clutch to stand sentinel. Jon accompanied her partway south, pausing at Queen's Crown where a weirwood sapling sprouted from snow. They spoke under its red leaves of burdens born, daughters fathered, brothers lost. Jon offered to escort her to the neck, but duties called him north. At parting, he pressed a small leather pouch into her hand. Inside, shards of shattered dragoglass that had slain the shadows. Remembrance, he said. For a knight who gave all. She closed her fist over the jagged fragments. For Jorah, she whispered. Back in Meereen, a tapestry of blooms greeted her, trumpet vines and dragon lilies, night blooming Sirius releasing perfumes to shame perfumers. Rhaego met her at the dock, sprinting in bare fur cloak, laughter ringing. He leapt into her arms, chiding that she'd flown away without him. She promised next time he would ride Sky alongside. Yet trouble brewed even amid petals. The Weaver's quarter murders had continued. 8 more bodies, each coin-tongued. Varys birds traced whispers to a subterranean amphitheater carved beneath the old pyramids. Grey Worm led unsullied detachments down spirals of rough-hewn stone, torches pushing back gloom. What they found chilled even battle-hardened hearts. An altar sculpted of human skulls cemented with pitch, its apex crowned by a single iron mask shaped like a crescent moon. Candles of rendered fat guttered in niches, blood runnels crisscrossed the floor linking drains that fed into a slit of abyss. No cultists remained, only wind whistling through tunnels and the faint hiss of rats. Daenerys stood before the altar, jaw muscle quivering. She recalled Jorah's sword cutting down a Norvosi reaver who tried to filch a dragon egg. Now echoes of that faith spilled into her city. She stepped onto the dais, grasped the crescent mask, and tore it free. Beneath lay a hole drilled straight through skull aggregate. Within, a single candle flickered blue despite wind. She quenched it between fingers. Wax hissed. Seal these tunnels, she ordered. Flood them with seawater. Post guards until the sun burns out. Grey Worm bowed, but his eyes hinted there were deeper cells they had not reached. Tyrion later suggested turning the pyramid catacombs into catfish farms. Nothing thwarts cults like the stench of rotting fish. Daenerys half-smiled, though dread pulsed behind her teeth. She dreamed that night of Jorah prowling tunnels, sword-bare, seeking coins on corpses' tongues. Next dawn, a raven arrived from Astapor. Archon Morgause reported a schism within the Long Night sect. Some claimed the Crescent Skull coins were counterfeit, minted by imposters. Others preached ascension through the dragon's blood. At the same hour, a Lysine healer on Breakwater noticed bites on a patient's arm that wept black ichor. By evening, 3 refugees convulsed and died, their blood crystallized before attendants' eyes. Melara's analysis found residue of dream silica, a rare powder used by shadowbinders. It appeared the sect laced their sacrifices with the powder, creating corpses as vessels for nightmares. Daenerys convened martial law at sundown. Rhaegal and Viserion patrolled the skies, Drogon perched atop the Great Pyramid breathing sparks like falling meteors. Unsullied checkpoints sprouted at every drain, rope bridge, and aqueduct. The city quieted under curfew, lanterns snuffed. Yet Daenerys refused to strangle Myreen's heartbeat with fear. She organized public gatherings in daylight where storytellers sang of dawn chasing night and children chalked dragons across plaza stones. The cult might lurk in shadow, but they could not devour laughter. A week passed. Then on the Feast of the New Moon, Grey Worm awakened her past midnight. The harbormaster intercepted a skiff bearing 3 unconscious men. They carried this. He produced a folded scrap of black sailcloth. Inside lay a crescent coin, yet its skull center had been scraped blank. Carved instead was a crude sigil. A bear's paw clutching 3 dragon heads. Daenerys' blood froze. Could some misguided soul twist Jorah's legacy? Or worse, was his name used to bait her? She summoned Varys. The monk eunuch arrived, cloak whispering. "My little birds whisper of a splinter sect," he said, "who believe that Jorah Mormont lives still beneath Winterfell, reborn as White King to dethrone all rulers and usher endless dusk. They claim you will join him if tipped into despair." She felt as though the world slanted sideways. "Blasphemy," she hissed. "Jorah rests where honor sleeps." "Fanatics seldom parse truth," Varys replied. She gripped the coin until edge bit flesh. Then truth must roar louder. Her decision formed like iron cooling. She would exhume no bones, yet she could wield memory as shield. Tomorrow she would ride Drogon across Meereen, carrying Rhaego before the cheering masses, showing life's pulse where death preened. And at twilight she would hold vigil in the royal square, recounting the saga of the Bear Knight to any who would listen, how loyalty rose above snow and ashes, how betrayal never seeded in hearts watered by faith. In story, Jorah would breathe. In story, cult lies would starve. The next morning dawned cerulean and still. She dressed in mourning black edged with silver runes, yet wove a garland of flame-kissed hibiscus through her braid. Rhaego wore his bear fur cloak and a scarlet sash stitched with the golden sun of Meereen. Drogon knelt, muscles rippling under obsidian hide. As Daenerys mounted, she felt the familiar thrum, the quickening of her pulse at each beat of leathern wings. Rhaego squealed joy and clutched the saddle pommel. They launched into sky. Below, plazas filled, faces tilted upward, mouths wide as if catching sky breath. Drogon banked low over the Great Pyramid, then rose in a spiral, painting smoke rings that shimmered. On the second pass, Daenerys stood in the saddle, cradling Rhaego high. The crowd erupted, a roar that drowned waves, that battered cult whispers against sunlit stone. When they landed in the royal square, thousands pressed to see. Merchants hurled rose petals, freedmen chanted, "Azandi's Eahan, our shield." The city, once slave to fear, burned bright with love. At twilight, lanterns strung between pyramids flickered like constellations come to earth. Daenerys took the dais, Rhaego perched on her hip. She spoke not of cults nor of nightmares. She spoke of a knight of Bear Island who guarded her step, who taught her that strength grew from mercy's soil. She told of Winterfell's long night and the spear he seized, of the promise he whispered at death's porch, "Teach him to be kind." Her words wove through the crowd, settling in hearts like warm embers. Tears slid down jagged cheeks, hardened thieves bowed heads, children clutched toy dragons and vowed to share them with smaller friends. When she finished, silence held. A silence thick with reverence, broken only when one old woman raised a shriveled hand and cried, "We will guard the bear's dream." The shout multiplied. Soon the square thundered with it. That night, Grey Worm's patrols apprehended 3 cultists near the shattered harbor gate. They carried bags of coins engraved with the revised bear dragon emblem. Under questioning, they confessed. The sect's high shadowbinder planned to ignite riot during the Queen's parade, but the city's sudden unity shattered nerve. He fled through catacombs toward the river. Unsullied tracked him to the very altar chamber, where they found his body half devoured by rats, eyes burned out by unknown flame. Some said Drogon's fire found him, others that the Bear Knight's spirit walked tunnels. Daenerys said nothing, but in her dreams that eve, she saw Jorah's silhouette disappear into lamplight, sword lowered, mission complete. Years turned as pages written in dusk ink. Rhaego grew, voice deepening, stride lengthening to match Dothraki gallop. He trained at dawn with Grey Worm, at dusk with Ser Barristan, learned sums from Tyrion, lore from Missandei. He rode Drogon at 11, soared over stepstones at 13, and by 15 spoke 3 tongues plus the silent dialect of unsullied hand signals. Yet each named day, Daenerys placed a winter rose on the onyx chessboard, the White King forever one move from checkmate. One crisp evening, as Myreen's festival of lights erupted in vermilion plumes, Rhaego ascended the terrace where Daenerys contemplated the horizon. In his hand gleamed a steel circlet topped by a stylized bear's head and 3 dragon wings, a crown he had forged in the city's reborn foundries. He knelt. "Mother, the free cities seek emissaries. Let me journey in your name. Let them see the realm Jorah Mormont dreamed living in me." She touched the circlet, finger lingering on the bear's engraved eyes. They gleamed with Queensguard stoicism. She saw Jorah there, steady as dawn, unbroken by betrayal. Tears threatened, but she smiled instead, lifting the crown to his brow. "Go," she whispered. "Trade in hope. Speak softly, carry kindness, and ride dragons when needed." Rhaego rose, eyes shining. From the harbor drifted the clang of bells, the promise of voyages yet unsailed. Drogon wheeled overhead, roaring benediction. The lights of Myreen painted sky and sea in hues of gold and crimson, and somewhere, carried on salt wind and jasmine, Daenerys almost heard Jorah's warm chuckle. "I will guard him," she murmured to the darkness beyond the balcony rail. "As you guarded me." Far below, the chessboard remained untouched, White King and Black Queen locked in timeless dance. But in the moon's glow, the ivory pieces seemed to glimmer, and for one fleeting heartbeat, she swore the bear-cloaked queen moved a half-step back, letting the Dragon King advance at last into the square promised him by fate, flame, and a love that has never known betrayal. The caravans left Myreen before first light, torches guttering in sea-driven wind, wheels creaking under silk-bundled tribute. Rhaego rode at their head astride Viserion, the pale dragon's wings ghosting against cobalt sky, scales shimmering like moonlit frost. Below him thundered a column of 600 unsullied led by Captain Narek, 50 Summer Island archers in macaw-plumed helms, and a detachment of 21 Dothraki bloodriders who had sworn their braids to the prince when he first loosed a Kopesh at 12. The mission was peace, trade, and spectacle, yet every saddle cinch was tightened for war. The free cities could be gracious hosts until coin or pride soured the wine. Daenerys watched from the jade promontory, cloak snapping about her ankles. Widow lights bobbed on the harbor, lanterns draped with crimson gauze, the city's nightly vigil against the Crescent Skull cult that had scattered underground like roaches once the queen's torchlight burned their nest. She breathed brine, uttered a prayer to gods old and new, and when Viserion banked to circle the pyramid one final time, raised a hand. Rhaego's shout of farewell carried down like a gull cry. Missandei approached, parchment in hand. "Astapor's envoy awaits, your grace. He bears a scroll edged with black wax." "Black for mourning," Daenerys murmured. "Or for deceit." She followed Missandei into the pillared corridor, sandal soles whispering over perfumed rushes. A hush clung to the hallway. It had been so since the cult incident, as though sound itself feared to echo too loudly lest it rouse shadows. Yet security brought cost. Market levies climbed, and murmurs of hardship sifted through tavern smoke. Tyrion warned that love bought with coins soon turns to debt. Daenerys balanced budget and mercy with the precision of her old Iraq lessons. Cut too shallow and rot festers. Too deep and the limb dies. The envoy stood inside the audience chamber. A thin man wrapped in red chemia, face painted with chalk dust to simulate leprosy scars. Some new Astapori affectation meant to honor the city's rebirth from slave scourge. He bowed, extending the black-sealed scroll. She broke the wax. Words unfurled in formal Valyrian. To Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains, queen of dragons and all free peoples, the plague of quills devours Astapor. Our scribes sicken first. Ink turns their veins charcoal, then bursts from eyes. Street criers claim scrolls themselves carry malediction. Commerce halts. Fear ripens. We beg your healer's lore and dragon's fire to cauterize parchment houses. Without aid, Astapor's benches will empty by new moon. The price you name we shall meet. Archon Morgas. She inhaled. The city that once traded in flesh now strangled by words, a grim calculus of justice. Yet thousands of innocents risked death. Send healers, she told Missandei. And Melara of Karth. If scrolls bleed, she will read the wound. Drogon needed flight, he would bear them, his fire a scalpel against contagion. She only prayed plague did not hide beneath flayed parchment waiting to leap nations like fleas. South winds bore Rhaego's caravan to Volantis in 10 days, sails fat and constant, sea glassy as a scrying mirror. The black wall loomed, ancient basalt mottled with lichen, and atop its war elephant-wide parapets marched the Tiger Legion in bronze dread masks. Yet when Viserion descended in a tumble of white gold wings, trumpets faltered, spears wavered, and the gates yawned open without challenge. Trade, the Triarchs had decided, outweighed pride. They feasted beneath lacquered pillars strung with lion-tail banners. Rhaego sat on a bench of ebony gifted by the elephant faction, his crown glinting under lanterns. To his right lounged Triarch Tiborio, skin oily with saffron butter, and to his left a pale Pentoshi magister whose eyes never quite met the Dragon Lord's gaze. Amid stewed river crabs and peeled dates drizzled with spice wine, Rhaego spoke of grain convoys safe-harbored in Meereen, of Myrish artisans offered quarter-free workshops inside the Harpy's Wing district, of glassblowers' guilds invited to shape stained panels for the new Great Library. The Triarchs countered with offers of elephants, electrum, and a daughter each. Rhaego smiled, demurred, accepted samples of sunset brocade instead. He had his mother's poise, Tyrion's subtlety, offer them less than they imagine they deserve, more than they dare refuse. Late that night, he slipped from the pleasure manor to walk the shadow market. Unsullied guards trailed at respectful distance, eyes scanning rooftops. He paused near a dripping arch where beggars squatted under eelskin awnings. One child, ribs stark beneath gray rags, proffered a reed flute in exchange for copper. Rhaego knelt, pressing coin into thin fingers, then asked the boy to play. A tremulous melody wound upward, simple, haunting. Clouds parted, silver draped the alley. For a moment the city's pulse slowed to match the boy's unsure tune. Rhaego realized Jorah would have lingered as well, would have traded stories of Bear Island snows for breadcrumbs and laughter. The thought warmed him. When he returned, Tiborio awaited on a balcony, moonlight blanching his jowls. "Your Highness," the Triarch purred, "Volantis prays alliance. But alliances rest on joined futures. A marriage to House Triarch secures trade." "My mother rules alone," Rhaego answered. "She weds no throne." Tiborio's bejeweled hand waved. "Not your mother, you." The line must branch beyond dragon and bear. Before Rhaego could refuse, the Triarch leaned closer, voice slipping into hush. "Beware Pentoshi ears. They sell secrets with wine." That night, Rhaego dreamt of scrolls unrolling into rivers, ink-forming crescent skulls, waters dark with script. He woke sweating, palm on the sword Missandei had named Winter's Mercy. In Meereen, reports twisted thicker, refugees coughing black ink, smiths complaining quills flared when heated. Daenerys donned riding leathers flecked with silver thread, armor woven in Valyrian flame, and mounted Drogon alongside Melara and a cadre of healers. They soared over the Skahazadan Delta, its labyrinth of reeds boiled silver in morning glare. 2 hours later, Astapor's red pyramids surfaced on the horizon, but scarred by black fungus creeping along stone like script. When Drogon landed before the Plaza of Punishment, the stench of charred papyrus choked the air. Fires blazed in iron braziers. Scribes hurled crates of scrolls into pyres, ink spattering sparks of midnight. Healers in gauze masks guided patients whose tongues had turned charcoal, letters bleeding from lips. Archon Morgause met the queen, eyes sunken. "It writes itself on us," he rasped. Words breed like maggots. Melara approached a patient shaking on a litter. She scraped dried ink from the man's forearm, smeared it onto a shard of glass, and murmured a charm. The residue writhed, forming symbols, half Valyrian glyph, half runic bear. She swallowed. "It's a sigil of false resurrection," she whispered to Daenerys. "A heresy promising return of one who sleeps." Daenerys' pulse hammered. Again Jorah's name twisted. "Burn every infected parchment," she ordered Grey Worm. "Quarantine the wordsmith stalls. Only blank reeds may leave the city." Melara's cure involved dragon flame and sandstone tonics. They worked through night, Drogon's heat sterilizing archive vaults, healers shoveling ash into barrows for deep burial. On the third dawn, the plague's tide receded. Survivors breathed unsullied air, hue returning to cheeks. Daenerys convened a gathering in the old fighting pit, announcing an edict. From this day, ink vats would be blessed with crushed dragon glass. Script steeped in that ward could carry no shadow curse. The crowd cheered. But privately, she wondered how far the cult's tendrils reached, who forged runes to resurrect Jorah's ghost, and why. Rhaego's caravan departed Volantis with modest accord, 2,000 sacks of Volantine saffron and a promise of tides on future elephant sails. They sailed upriver toward Selhurries, then Myr, sampling wines, signing ports. In Qohor, the Black Goat priests offered obsidian axes, proclaiming iron fades where shadow rules. Rhaego accepted one axe, testing its bite against oak. It lopped the branch clean with scant effort. Throughout the journey, Pentoshi Magister Loreto shadowed the party, ever courteous, always present at feasts. In Norvos, he gifted Rigo a tapestry depicting Mormont heraldry entwined with dragon wings. To honor the Bear Knight, he said, eyes too bright. Rigo felt unease coil. That night, unsullied scouts caught Loreto's scribe skulking outside camp, coin tongues sewn into cloak lining. Under questioning, the scribe revealed a rendezvous planned at the ruins of Roiner Holdfast, where high priests of the Crescent Skull sect sought the prince's blood to ink their codex of rebirth. Rage surged through Rigo like wildfire across parchment. He ordered the scribe imprisoned and doubled watches. 2 days later, they reached the Holdfast, a lopsided tower half swallowed by river mud. Approaching cautiously, Rigo and 8 Unsullied slipped inside. Scrolls littered the floor, each sheet blank save for one line repeating in jagged Valyrian, Curagan G. Barrows Jalon. Rise by Bear's gift. In the center lay a stone altar stained with fresh blood and on it a silver death mask shaped as half-bear, half-dragon. Rigo touched Winter's mercy to the mask. Cold shot up the blade. Beneath the mask, a cavity yawned, empty save for a single raven feather. The message was clear, the sect wanted a vessel. They had prepared the altar, awaited a prince. They will not find one, Rigo swore. A whisper slithered through shadows, and from the crumbled stairwell emerged a woman cloaked in tattered pages. Eyes rimmed with dried ink, she pleaded, spare the wordborn. We seek creation, not death. The Unsullied seized her. She laughed, tongue black. Rigo's gaze hardened. Creation thrives on life, he said. He signaled. The woman's wrists were bound, she would answer to Myrini's justice. On return to camp, he wrote his mother, Cult hunts heirs blood, beware scribes bearing gifts. He penned in both Valyrian and the silent finger runes Grey Worm had taught. In Meereen, Daenerys welcomed Lysene ambassadors for charter renewal. Their eyes widened at rumors of ink plague, she soothed them with display of dragon glass wards. After the signing, a page handed Daenerys a sealed vellum. The seal bore a bear's paw and 3 dragon heads Rigo's cipher. Inside lay warning of the cult ambush and a single phrase, the word which is captured. Relief intertwined with dread. She summoned Tyrion. Prepare tribunal, she said. Sons of the Harpy once gashed the city, shadowbinders will not reopen wounds. Tyrion nodded, retrieving court papers. The prisoner arrived at dawn, soiled pages trailing like molting feathers, wrists shackled. She named herself Syra of Norvos. Under Lantern of Truth, she confessed sect doctrine. They believed the walls closing trapped a shard of the Night King's essence within Jorah's sword, released when Daenerys thrust it through ice. They sought to free that shard by forging a new vessel of combined dragon and bear blood. Rigo. Daenerys rejected the heresy as madness. Yet Syra's conviction chilled her. Ink remembers what tongues forget. Daenerys ordered Syra incarcerated within the catfish dungeons. Far from quills. She spent hours staring at Jorah's sword displayed in Council Hall. Could a whisper of death linger in steel? Maester Gorman's tests found no trace of ice magic, only ripples of Valyrian forging. Still, she commanded Melara to weave purifying sigils into the blade's fuller, binding it to the city's pyromantic beacon. If darkness sought the sword, it would taste searing sun. Months passed. The sect's embers seemed quenched. Trade flow. Reached, new canals cut through silt flats, vineyards stretched along warm terraces. Daenerys toured provinces, christening aqueducts, freeing last indentured tanners. Each ceremony she wore the bear-wing cloak Rigo's smiths had gifted, a silent testament that trust might outlive flesh. Yet one night, deep in Meereen's longest eclipse, Bran Stark's raven arrived featherless, wings shaved, message stitched beneath skin in blood ink script. Missandei, pale, delivered it. Bran's words shook like winter storm, spells falter again, I dream of eyes of ink, not ice. The wall holds, but writing crawls across its face, runes that drink torchlight. Beware quills. Daenerys summoned council. The cult evolves, Tyrion surmised, as all pests do when routed. Varys spoke of parchment caravans bound north, disguised as salted cod. Ser Barristan recommended intercept, swift and brutal. Daenerys agreed. She dispatched 3 dramans, captained by Summer Islanders, to scour sea lanes for codboats bearing fresh ink. Within a week, they captured 2 ships. Holds brimmed with barrels of brine and scroll canisters wax-sealed. The scribes aboard, all mute by tongue removal, carried slivers of dragoglass sewn into cheeks, ready to cut voices free should their silence falter. Torture proved fruitless. The men died with smiles when inked letters on their skin ignited, consuming them to ash. Fear rippled through Meereen. Markets hushed, scribes doused candles early. Daenerys stood upon the great pyramid balcony addressing throngs. Flame bears truth. Shadows cling to pages, but we wield light. She commanded a citywide festival of lanterns, encouraging stories spoken aloud, songs sung from rooftops, sounds to drown the hush of deathly script. The cult fed on silence. She would deny them feast. That evening, thousands gathered, torches lifted high, voices weaving Norvashi hymns with Dothraki writing songs, Westerosi ballads with Giscari lullabies. Drogon spiraled overhead, fire painting constellations. No crescent coins were found that night, no scribes disappeared. In the wake of communal breath, cult specters scattered. Rhaego reached Pentos on his return arc. Illyrio Mopatis had long since died, but his grandniece controlled the fat merchant's holdings. She greeted Rhaego beneath lemon tree colonnades, offering candied peel and sly questions. Throughout dinner, the Magister Loretto appeared again, this time bearing a jeweled chest. He opened it. Inside lay a leather-bound tome with blank pages. "A gift," he said. "Write the next epic of dragons." Rhaego accepted politely but felt unease. Blankness, to a cult, was canvas. That night he asked his blood riders to slice open the binding. Within the spine they found a quill fashioned of human finger bone, tip dipped in dried ink. They hurled book and quill into Viserion's throat. Flame swallowed them. At dawn, ships unfurled canvas for home. As sails filled, Rhaego penned final report. Return imminent. Enemy shifts to void. Blank page as blade. Daenerys awaited on the harbor wall. When Viserion's silhouette crested the dawn, her heart soared. Rhaego dismounted, dust-coated yet bright-eyed. He knelt, pressed forehead to her palm. She sensed heavier burden than mere travel. Over private supper he recounted each ambush and gift. She listened, face still as frozen sea. "The cult values emptiness now," he said. "They know we burn words, so they hide in silence." She stared into wine. "Then we must teach silence to sing." That night, Daenerys convened a conclave of singers, poets, town criers, and parchment masters. She proposed the Great Chronicle. An ever-spoken history, memorized, performed nightly in plazas, engraved on temple bells and taught to children. Words would live in breath, not solely on scrolls. If ink turned heretical, memory would outlast it. Work began at dawn. Scholars gathered the city's stories, scribes recited aloud as they wrote. They would not labor in hush. Children practiced verses under sun. The air thrummed. Yet on Chronicle's fifth night, bells tolled frantic. A warehouse near the Weaver's Quarter erupted in ink-black flame, smoke shaped like raven wings. Grey worms' troops doused lattice roofs with seawater, but the fire bruised the sky for hours. In the charred shell, they found bones fused to quills, 30 copyists who refused to speak while working late. On the wall scrawled in soot, "Silence is scripture." Daenerys clenched Jorah's sword until knuckles blanched. No more playing nursemaid. She ordered a hunt for cult sanctums beyond city bounds. Scouts ranged across old battlefields, through burnt Khalasar camps, along Whispering Sound. One Clavides returned with news, a fortress in the Red Waste, carved from saltstone, lit with night lanterns shaped like crescent moons. She readied war council. Rhaego insisted he lead. "They seek my blood, let them choke on its fire." Daenerys refused to send him alone. She would ride Drogon at his flank, Unsullied and Dothraki behind, Melara at the rear weaving counterglyphs in rising dust. Within 3 days, the host reached the saltstone fortress, ragged towers gleaming under moon, walls etched with countless names in ink that shimmered dark silver. Before the gate stood 8 cloaked figures, heads cowled, hands empty. When Daenerys hailed, one stepped forward. Syra of Norvos escaped somehow. "Mother of Flame," she called, voice raw, "write no further. Let the bear return or ink will drown the world." "Your arrests," Daenerys answered. "Ink cannot raise him." She raised a hand. Drogon rumbled. Syra spread arms. "Then burn us. Our devotion seeds deeper." She sliced her palm, black blood dripped, writhing into runes upon soil. Melara gasped, each drop birthed tiny worm-like glyphs crawling toward the fortress. Flame roared. Drogon bathed gate and cultists alike. Syra's scream twisted as runes lifted swirling, forming a column of letters that spiraled skyward, coalescing into a phantom bear shape, maw open. Rhaego spurred Viserion, launching into column, white fire colliding midair with ink dread. Letters burst into sparks, raining midnight dust. Unsullied stormed breached gate. Inside, halls thrummed with scratching quills unseen, as though stone itself wrote its own undoing. Grey Worm's spear thrust shattered ink runes on walls. Melara traced counter sigils, her voice lashing wards until letters fled like roaches from lantern. At the fortress heart, they found a circular chamber with a pool of glossy onyx, liquid ink so deep starlight seemed caught. Above the pool hung Jorah's likeness carved of bone, suspended by hair-fine chains. Daenerys approached. The statue's eyes wept ink. Melara whispered, "Anchor." The cult anchored spell to image, feeding it with stories of betrayal redeemed. They aimed to twist love into door for Death Shard. Daenerys lifted the dragonglass shards Jon had gifted. She scattered them across the pool. Each shard hissed, hungry. Ink writhed, recoiling, glass drank blackness, veins glowing ember. Drogon exhaled a narrow flame, shards flared, fusing pool to brittle shell. The chamber trembled. Outside, towers cracked. "Leave it buried," Daenerys said. They retreated as fortress collapsed inward, saltstone eroding to dune. Ink dried to brittle flakes that wind whisked away. On the horizon, dawn bled vermilion. Rhaego dismounted beside her. "Is it done?" "For now," she answered. "Words outlive fire, but we guide their pen." She looked west, where Meereen awaited with chronicle yet unfinished. "Come. We have stories to teach." Years rolled as tide. The great chronicle spread across Essos, then Westeros, minstrels carrying verses to market squares, septons weaving stanzas into sermons, Dothraki Khalasars singing lines beneath starry grass seas. Every festival, a storykeeper added new chapter. Every child learned refrain of bear and dragon, of steadfast heart, of ink and flame. The cult dwindled. Without silence to nest in, they faded to rumor. Some said they retreated under frozen seas, others whispered they turned to carving runes in stone giants deep in Skagos. But none returned to Meereen. On Daenerys' 60th name day, Rhaego, now High Regent of the Free Cities, hosted a grand convocation within the new marble amphitheater built over the old Harpy Arena. Lanterns carved as bears and dragons illuminated tiers, petals drifted from high balconies. Delegations arrived from Winterfell, Sunspear, Riverrun, and Karth. Jon Snow, silver-streaking black curls, gifted an ice-forged locket bearing dragonglass cross and weirwood leaf. Tyrion unveiled a cask of arbor gold aged since the long night. Grey Worm and Missandei performed a silent dance of protection. At apex of feast, Rhaego addressed the multitude. "Tonight we honor Daenerys Stormborn's victories," he said, voice echoing, "but also the victory of loyalty. One night's unbroken pledge outlived death, ink, and time. Raise cups to Ser Jorah of Bear Island." Thousands lifted goblets. A hush accompanied the toast, not mournful, but full of reverence. Daenerys felt tears sting yet did not blink them away. They belonged to present as much as past. She rose, steady. "In every story you tell, remember the weight of your words. They are swords or salves. Speak kindly, write wisely." She raised her own cup. "To the bear who taught us." Outside the amphitheater, 3 dragons wheeled, their shadows merging into one colossal shape across marble and crowd. Sky thundered with their roar. Somewhere within that rolling echo, Daenerys fancied she caught a rough, beloved chuckle rich with northern snow and Essosi sun. Time crept forward. Rhaego wed a Valyrian scholar, fathered twins, Nyra and Jorah, bright of eye and quick of wit. Daenerys taught them to ride hatchlings, Tyrion taught them sums, Grey Worm trained them in spear forms. In quiet hours, Daenerys composed the final stanza of the Great Chronicle upon the inside cover of Jorah's old leather journal, the only page she allowed herself to write since the ink plague. It read, "Let minds recall where parchments burn. Let tongues protect what quills might turn. Let faith endure when shadow calls. For love stands taller than the walls." She closed the book, set it upon the onyx chessboard. The Black Queen and White King touched at last, their carved wings interlaced. She smiled, smoothing the winter rose dried to silvery husk atop the board. Dawn filtered through terrace shutters. She stepped outside, hair unbound, and felt the sun's warmth upon her face. Below, grandchildren chased one another around young dragons, laughter peeling sky. Ships cluttered harbor waters, sails bearing rose, sunburst, kraken, bear. Symbols once at war, now braided by trade and story. A rust-colored breeze stirred and, for a breath, smelled of Bear Island pines. She closed her eyes. "I kept him kind," she whispered. Drogon landed on the parapet, folding vast wings. He lowered his head. She stroked the scar along his jaw, earned in the night of Inkbear. "Ready for another flight, old friend?" she asked. The dragon's rumble reverberated through stone. She descended the stair to lilting voices. Rhaego instructing Nyra on archery stance, little Jorah insisting he could ride solo. Life thrived, unstoppable. Daenerys mounted Drogon, lifting Jorah the Younger to saddle. Together they rose, soaring above Meereen's domes, above scarred Astapor now green with new gardens, above Volantis where river mirrors shimmered. They climbed until clouds silvered under claw shadow. High above the world, Daenerys spread arms, hair flaring in wind. In the hush between heartbeats, she thought she felt a familiar armored hand steadying her shoulder, guiding gaze toward horizon. Fly true, Jorah's memory murmured. And she did, carving arcs across morning sky, trailing hope, stories, and the unbreakable line of a promise kept, each wing beat scattering remnants of ink, sowing instead seeds of song that would bloom centuries beyond the bear's last roar. Waves sloshed beneath Drogon's shadow, their foam-streaked gold as if sunlight bled from his wings. Daenerys guided the ancient dragon in a slow corkscrew above Meereen's harbor, letting his vast form blot the noon glare so Jorah the Younger could study the city unblind. The boy clutched the pommel with confident ease now, no more frantic wobbling, though each gust still yanked his sable curls into disarray. He was barely 8, but his legs already locked to saddle in the Bear Knight's old style, knees bent, heels angled out so weight absorbed flight's lurch. Lean into the wind, Daenerys murmured over the roar, wrapping one arm about his waist. Feel its intent. Jorah laughed, voice paper-thin against Drogon's basso thrumming. It wants to tickle me. Yes, she smiled, and sometimes to test you. Below, the harbor bustled. Crimson sails of the Triarch's tribute fleet fluttered beside striped Dornish caravels. Between them bobbed donkey brown skiffs from the summer isles and squat river barges loaded with pyramid-shaped bales of raw silk. On the breakwater, longshoremen lifted fish barrels while children scampered barefoot, waving linen streamers. The great chronicle carved on the outer seawall 5,000 lines of interlocking verse. Glittered where masons hammered fresh stanzas, each word inlaid with slivers of mother of pearl. Farther inland, the new Dragon Academy rose on terraces cut into what had once been the Harpy's Talon quarry. A half-moon gable crowned its roof, beneath it sprawled practice yards marked with chalk spirals where hatchlings learned to bank and break. Rigo, now approaching 30 summers, oversaw the academy personally, insisting each student memorize the Chronicle's first canto before touching scale. A rider must speak his mount in story before in reign, he told skeptics. Some scoffed, yet results outshone tradition, not one fatal mishap in 13 seasons. Daenerys angled Drogon toward the terraces, spiraling lower until hatchlings squealed and flapped stubby wings. Stable hands pointed skyward, all etched in sunburnt cheeks. Jorah the Younger raised both arms, crowing triumph. Drogon rumbled approval. They drew level with the academy's upper balcony where Rigo waited, Nyra beside him in sand-colored riding leathers. He saluted, fist thumped to heart as Nyra bowed with fluid showmanship learned from Carthene courtiers. The sight gilded Daenerys' chest with warmth so fierce it hurt. She set Drogon onto the landing pad of polished basalt. Heat shimmered from the dragon's nostrils, stone-blackened where talons bit. Jorah slid down the neck rope and sprinted to Nyra, brandishing an invisible sword to challenge his older sister. Nyra parried with her finger, booped his nose, and darted away. Rigo grinned, stepping forward to steady his mother as she dismounted. Scouts from Slaver's Bay returned, he said once children dashed out of earshot. No crescent marks on the dunes. The cult seems to have retreated beyond the smoking sea. Daenerys exhaled. Or burrowed deeper. Malara's scry pool shows quiet. She believes the fortress collapse severed their binding. I trust Malara's sight, Daenerys said. Then, softer, I trust yours more. Rigo's smile held both gratitude and lingering caution. He glanced up at Drogon, who settled like a cathedral gargoyle atop girdered buttresses. The council begs you stay another fortnight. But I sense wanderlust stirring. I am restless, she admitted, smoothing wind-tossed braids. When sky calls, ground grates. He studied her, catching subtle fatigue behind her eyes. Decades of rain, nights poured into chronicle edits, ceaseless vigilance for shadows in words. You've earned rest. Rest widens cracks, she replied. Joy fills them. Her gaze followed Jorah and Nyra, their laughter echoing among columns. Joy mouthfuls flight. I will patrol again tomorrow, from Laser to Hazdan's lip. Let world remember dragons rule by presence, not rumor. Rigo inclined his head. Take Viserion as escort. Sky thieves haunt the dusk latitudes, coal-wing wyverns large enough to harry livestock. Very well. She touched his cheek. Come evening, share a meal. I want updates on Old Volantis Senate. That night, Meereen celebrated Lantern Night, Festival of Parted Souls, when citizens penned wishes onto rice paper globes and launched them on desert winds. Streets glowed with drifting orbs, grandmothers asking health for grandchildren, merchants bartering with fortune for bountiful harvest, lovers entrusting flame to carry vows beyond mountain spines. In the royal square, Daenerys knelt beside Nyra and Jorah as they inked messages atop a crimson lantern. Jorah, tongue protruding, scrawled "Bear Dragon together forever." Nyra embellished letters with tiny starbursts. "Who is Bear?" Nyra teased. "Granduncle Jorah," the boy proclaimed. "He guards my window when storms grow." Daenerys smiled. "Yes, he does." She helped them tie the wick, then lit it from a brazier's patient tongue. Flame inflated the globe, silk stretched translucent, casting ruby light across the children's faces. Together they released it. The lantern rose, bobbed, then soared to mingle with hundreds, twinkling like a reversed constellatory snowfall. Tyrion arrived, leaning on silver-topped cane. Age stooped him, but eyes retained imp-spark. He nodded skyward. "If each wish weighs one heartbeat," he mused, "the heavens throb tonight. Do you send one?" Daenerys asked. He twirled the cane. "I would, but I've learned wishes make poor drinking companions. They vanish by dawn." His grin wavered, softened. "Still, perhaps I'll raise a lantern to absent siblings. Even Cersei." He shrugged. "Forgiveness tastes like arbor vinegar, but improves with age." "How fares the treasury?" she queried lightly. "Forgiveness aside, we still count coins." Tyrion chuckled. "Healthy. The new spice levy on Ironborn rum funds half the library annex. Odd synergy." "Synergy," she echoed. In the swirl of lanterns, she saw ghostly faces. Viserys, Drogo, Khal Jacko, even the slavers she'd immolated. Each shaped her reign. Each deserved thought. A sudden hush rippled. From the harbor, a flare rocketed skyward, bursting into 3 rings, signal of urgent arrival. Grey Worm materialized beside her. "War galley at Western Pier. Sails unknown." Tyrion sighed. "So ends nostalgia." The Queen's entourage strode along lamplit wharfs where gulls screeched at intrusion. At pier's end bobbed a narrow-beamed galley, hull painted with spiral glyphs of indigo and jade. Crew wore feathered masks. At the gangplank waited a tall woman garbed in obsidian scale mail. She removed mask revealing coal dark skin flecked with earthen red, eyes like polished jet. "Your Grace," she greeted in clipped common. "I am Inyoka of Uthio, high-scaled speaker for the Lizard Kings." Daenerys blinked. "Uthio lies beyond Jade Gates. Few sail so far. Storms changed currents. We drifted to your sea by omen." Inyoka produced a carved tablet. On it etched an intricate symbol. A bear entangled with a serpent, both wound by quills. "Our seers dream this mark. Ice beyond horizon whispers across water, asks for bear's heart flame. Sea queen whose fire devours ink." Tyrion muttered, "The cult found new mouths across the world." Daenerys accepted the tablet, tracing grooves. "What does ice promise?" Inyoka tilted head. "We know only dread. But Jade Islands whimper as shadows nibble at scroll hunters' camps." Words crawl again. A weight settled in Daenerys' bones, old as the first coin. She turned to Grey Worm. "Ready a diplomatic squadron. We sail dawn." Tyrion coughed. "You intend to outrun old age by crossing half the world?" She met his eyes. "Until no ink drips venom." Nyra, having followed unseen, stepped to her side. "Then I will sail as heir. Father secures east, I watch west." Daenerys measured the girl, 17, agile, mind honed on treatises and aerial maneuvers atop her gleaming copper dragon, Estra. "Very well," she said at length. "You shall be my voice where my presence cannot linger." Nyra's eyes, violet-flecked gold, shone. Preparations devoured the night. By dawn, 2 Dramans, the Dawn Chaser and the Oath of Balerion, lay seabound, holds stocked with oranges, salted goat, hogsheads of fresh water, and barrels of obsidian arrowheads newly forged. Melara could not travel, her health waned after constant warding spells, but gifted Nyra a silver circlet set with star sapphire to amplify protective incantations. Grey Worm selected a phalanx of 15 unsullied cadets from the newest class. They marched with crisp precision into the belly of the Dawn Chaser. Missandei compiled linguistic primers on Lizard King dialects, pressed them into Nyra's satchel. Daenerys oversaw all yet packed lightly herself. Jorah's sword, the dragonglass locket, a rolled copy of the Chronicle's first canto, and a pensive heart still learning to let children brave storms. She hugged Rhaego fiercely upon departure. "Guard the Chronicle," she whispered. And keep Jorah, she nodded toward the boy climbing Estra's rigging for handshake goodbye safe in stories. Rigo replied, we will carve new verses for your return. Their embrace held unspoken fear that manuscripts fade or hawks tear sales. But they released. Drogon launched from the turret with Daenerys and Jorah Jr. astride. He would accompany her to Uthio, though only to first outpost, then he'd ferry messages home. Nyra followed on Estra, wings bronze in sunrise, trailing pennons emblazoned with bear dragon crest. The galleys unfurled sails mottled crimson and gold. Harbor bells tolled farewell. Lantern husks still drifted across bay like ghostly fireflies, wishes lingering after festival. From the quarterdeck, Tyrion, appointed acting steward during their voyage, raised a goblet of honey wine, calling, God speed you, Mother of Chronicles. The crew roared. Rigo atop pylons answered with salute, while Myrinese crowds thronged breakwaters, chanting old Khalasar war songs now repurposed as blessings for travelers. Daenerys felt wind gather under Drogon's wings, carrying desert heat mingled with jasmine from riverside gardens. She glimpsed new Valyrian banners flapping atop merchant guild halls, a three-headed dragon encircled by quill and rose entwined. Her city pulsed vibrant, hopeful, yet threads of ink still crept across worlds' edges. She vowed to chase them to final dot. Mid-voyage, storms clawed. Jade Sea hissed under black clouds, swollen swells slamming galley hulls. Drogon soared above Maelstrom, yet Nyra's Estra, smaller, struggled. Lightning forked, striking mast of Oath of Balerion. Flames whooshed, sailors cried. Nyra dove, Estra clamping burning rigging with iron talons, dragging mast stub free before fire spread. Rain doused deck. Crew cheered mistress of copper flame. A calamity hardened. On fifth storm night, lookout horn blared, shapes looming broad-winged wyverns of WY waste, summoned perhaps by unnatural whispers. They attacked in swarm, jaws dripping bile acid. Drogon met them with thunder breath, wings beat hurricane, yet sheer numbers pressed. On Dawn Chaser's forecastle, unsullied formed shield wall around Anyoka. Arrows of obsidian felled wyverns mid-plunge, acid spattered wood, sizzling. Estra shredded one beast, biting off head to toss into sea. Above tumult, Daenerys sensed something else riding the gale, scratching voices, half language, half mind song. She pressed hand to Jorah's locket. Visions flickered. Runic coils slithering across parchment, forming horizon-wide gate through which shadow forms oozed. She gasped. The plague of words had found new parchment, storm clouds themselves. She set jaw. Burn the sky, she told Drogon. Dragonfire strobed midnight. Flames licked Stormbelly, evaporating rain to steam, blasting wyvern swarm back. The fire carved sigils of light across cloud, burning away scratch rune illusions. As sky cleared, surviving wyverns screeched retreat southward. Wind eased and dawn's first colors draped horizon. In aftermath, decks littered with wyvern corpses, acid-pocked planks. No crew lost lives, but morale shook. Daenerys gathered sailors. Storms saw break, she told them, but we bend, not cleave. We chase shadow to world's rim if need be. She invited them to speak chronicle lines aloud. Voices rose hoarse but defiant, echoing across calm sea. Weeks later, they sighted Uthio, emerald archipelago ringed by chalk cliffs and mangrove labyrinths. Stilt villages perched above turquoise shallows, carvings of lizard gods glowered from each piling. Inyoka led landing party through vine-choked canals to Stone-Tongue Spire, throne mound of lizard kings. At the chamber's heart lay an obelisk engraved with bear dragon entwined by quills, ink fresh. Seers claimed glyphs manifested overnight after north winds carried songs of glass and flame. Daenerys knelt, tracing grooves. Inkir pulsed faintly, alive, seeking host. She realized the cult's godless scripture had escaped page to etch living rock. If left unchecked, it would worm through continent. She conferred with Nyra and Inyoka, plan formed, saturate obelisk with dragon flame laced by jade sap resin, a natural solvent of Uthio that neutralized shadowbark toxins. Ritual required chant of Chronicles' first stanza recited in tongues of both dragon and lizard. Preparations spanned 2 days. While alchemists refined resin, Daenerys explored island villages. She saw children painting their faces with crushed seashells, mimicking dragons and bears entwined as symbols of hope. She asked what they knew. They spoke of dreaming a kind bear guiding queen of flame across storms. Word of Jorah's loyalty had crossed seas ahead of her. Ritual dawned on third sunrise. Drogon and Estra hovered above spire while Inyoka's priest chorus intoned deep croaks. Daenerys, Nyra, and Grey Worm recited chronicle lines in unison, each phrase forging chain of memory. On final syllable, dragons exhaled. Flame mingled with resin mist. Obelisk ignited teal-green, letters writhing. A gust sucked shadows upward. They burst into cinders against dragon fire. When smoke cleared, only blank stone remained, its surface shimmering glass smooth. Silence bowed across jungle. Then drums sounded, low and thunderous. Villagers poured from mangroves chanting gratitude. Daenerys raised hand for quiet. "Stories saved us," she declared. "Guard them." She gifted lizard priests copies of Chronicle carved into clay tablets, inkless and fire-baked. That night, feasts of speckled eel and spiced jackfruit sprawled along moonlit wharfs. Nyra danced with Inyoka, copper hair braided with jade feathers. Jorah Jr. traded Dothraki knife tricks for child lizard riders' blowgun lessons. Daenerys watched, fatigue sliding from shoulders. Yet mid-mirth she felt tugged vision whisper, ice turning to ink beneath northern lights. The wall stirred again. She excused herself, stepping to peer where Drogon lounged. Stars mirrored in lagoon eyes. She stroked his scales, whispering of endless chase. "Soon, old friend," she said, "I will rest the sword." But not yet. Drogon's purr vibrated boards. Return voyage sped under favoring winds. Mid-sea, Raven from Rego landed on mast, cult quiet. Chronicle spread. King's Landing seeks dragon ambassador. Jorah trumpets school games. Daenerys smiled. Yet a footnote followed, Bran dreams of Inkwell starfall, says path not done. She folded the parchment, gazed north. Her quest turned endless, perhaps by necessity. Ink would always search cracks, stories must fill them. She resolved to found word wardens, order of bards and pyromancers guarding lexicons. Nyra volunteered to lead. Jorah Jr. insisted he train as first knight of song. Daenerys agreed. When Myreen's towers appeared on horizon, bells pealed. Harbor lined with lanterns, daylight version, each globe painted with chronicle verses. Tanners waved tanned hides reading, "Welcome home, mother of words." Rego, clad in indigo silk, stood at end of pier holding newborn daughter, tiny babe he named Dina, eyes violet and gold swirling like horizon at dawn. He placed child in his mother's arms. She kissed downy brow, heart swelling. Later, at courtyard banquet, Tyrion tapped goblet. "I propose amended title, Daenerys, Keeper of Tales." Applause thundered. Daenerys raised Jorah's sword, its etched runes now bright with sun sigils. "I keep only what you carry," she told assembled throng. "Words in your throats, fire in your kindness." She planted blade in plinth of onyx for all to see. "May we never draw it in anger again." Crowds roared. Chronicle acolytes began reciting newest stanza describing Jade Islands saved by flame. Children joined in. Above, dragons chorused their own verse, wings beating rhythm into cloud. Night crept soft. Daenerys climbed balcony to her private study where chessboard awaited. The White Dragon King and Bear Queen touched still, but now beside them a tiny pawn carved of jade stood, symbol of new generation. She placed it forward one square. "Your move, old friend," she whispered to starlit sky. And though silence spilled, she felt warmth along back as if a bear-cloaked knight watched, pleased. She turned to rest at last, the city's lullaby of spoken stories wafting through shutters, inkless, fearless, and alive.